Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful, creepy human being you, and welcome to today's true crime episode. I am so happy that you are here. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be having a true crime marathon. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, like this week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. Now, before we get into the details of today's case, I first need to say a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Ana Luisa Jewelry. If you've been here a while, you've heard of Ana Luisa Jewelry. I wear their pieces literally every single day in every single video. These are Ana Luisa, but if you haven't been here, I will let you know who they are now, or if you're not familiar, which I'm sorry that you're not, but you're about to be. Ana Luisa is a jewelry company that creates high quality pieces but at affordable prices. This is jewelry that lasts a long time. I've had these pieces for a long time, but they also give you a 2-year warranty, which is amazing. But the most important thing is that it doesn't break the bank. Okay, for me, that is key. Now, as you guys know, the holidays are upon us. Yesterday, at the time you're watching this, was Thanksgiving, so the time for shopping is like right now. And Ana Luisa's jewelry is the perfect gift for those of you who want to gift somebody in your life the gift of time with style. And truly, what is more stylish than some beautiful, dainty, lovely pieces of really high quality jewelry, even if what you are styling them with is a messy bun in the same shirt you've been wearing for like 3 days in a row. I'm not speaking from experience, but I know some of us live that life. Ana Luisa's pieces are the perfect thing to treat those that you love, or even yourself, just to make sure that you can sort of elevate every day. Plus, they offer speedy shipping all over the world. So today I have a couple of pieces I want to show you that I got from Ana Luisa, okay? And I'm very into earrings still. Like, that's my number one. It just really, really is. And I love stacking them. That's why I have 2 piercings. Honestly, I kind of want to get a third one right here in between the 2 to have another option because I love stacking pieces. But let me show you what I got here. So I have these 2 pieces to show you, and once you see these selections, like these are some of their newer things they have, and when I saw them on the side, I was like, my goodness, I'm excited to stick those in my head. Okay, so the first pair I have to show you are these hoops. Oh, I love a hoop. If you don't know, if you are new here and you haven't paid attention to my ears, these are the ones I wear like every day. I'm not an influencer. I don't know if I'm holding this right, but they're like a hoop that's chained. I love a hoop. I'm a big hoop girl, and I like these because they're bigger, so they give me more of like a fancy, rich feel. And look, and they're so cute. They're called, I believe, the Guella large. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but aren't these so beautiful? And just wait till you see the other ones. Just wait. Okay, so these are the 2-tone Kaylas. And if you have been here and you've paid attention to me, you may know that I love mixing metals. Oh, I love mixing metals so much. So I think those are lovely. Now listen, I probably wouldn't stack these 2 together because they're both pretty statement. And right now I feel a bit like a pirate, but like actually that's kind of hot, so maybe I would. But typically I would take either of these and have these be like the show, and then put in one of my little Johns, like my little C for my son and my husband, or the rose that I keep in my ear for my best friend. Have those in the second one. But look at how beautiful and shiny both of these are. Which one do I want to wear today? I think I want to wear the hoops today. I am really into those hoops. So those are the pieces I have. I'm now going to wear these hoops the rest of today. And truly, like, the most glowing endorsement I think one can give to any product is the fact that you actually love and use it. And if you go back and look at literally any of my videos over the last, 2 years, I'm wearing Ana Luisa pieces in every single video. And these are just new beauties that can be added to my collection. And I do plan to gift personally some Ana Luisa this year, because I typically do gift Ana Luisa when gifting is a possibility, because I love the idea of something that somebody can wear that's beautiful and that you can know that you've added some sparkle to their everyday, which is what I do when I wear mine. So I tell you all of this because I have great news, and that is that if you are still shopping for something special for somebody special, Ana Luisa is currently having their biggest sale of the year. Right now it's up to 30% off site-wide, and if your cart hits dollars, they're giving away a free item, a free piece of jewelry as a gift. So it really doesn't get better than that. So if all of this sounds as good to you as it does to me and you want to try Ana Luisa out for yourself, make sure to click the link in my description box to let them know I'm the one that sent you, and pick out your new favorite everyday piece, like the one I'm wearing now, your new statement piece, like these beautiful hoops, or a gift for somebody you love today. Now I just want to say a big thank you to Ana Luisa Jewelry for partnering with me on today's video. It's partners like Ana Luisa that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock, don't ever change. And now with all of that said, let's go ahead and get into this video. This video is something that I wanted, if you've been here, I like to put out my compilations for those of you who like to watch several cases. They're usually cases that I put in the compilations or cases that I feel like more eyes need to be on, videos that I feel like didn't get the attention they deserve, or just cases that I feel like more people need to hear about, because a lot of the ones that I cover are lesser known. And those videos tend to not get watched as much, but their stories are just as important. So there's that. And then also, I know there are so many of you who like to put on your favorite YouTuber, which for whatever reason, some of you, I am that person, which thank you. And why? Nobody I know can understand why anyone would want to hear the sound of my frog voice for that long, but some of you do. And it's Black Friday right now. We're just chilling. We're in a food coma. We want to hang out, and I want to be able to do that for you. So I don't take days off. I like to give back when I can, and this is the only way that I know how to do that for you. So if you want to listen to a very long true crime video, this is for you. If you don't like silence like me, this is for you. If you need a video to put on for your dog while you go to the store, this is for you. So please just keep on watching. Today we're going to be discussing the horrible murder of 18-year-old Aliza Parsy. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both Bratterstein, but no pressure. All right, now that I'm done begging you to join my cult, we can get into this video. Now, this is a case that I had never heard of before. It had never been recommended to me. It's actually one that I came upon while I was doing some research on the internet for another case. It's just, I don't know if you've ever done this. If you're researching a case, maybe you would have to do YouTube for this to be a thing, but where you're on one website and then you see all these articles pop up on the right. Right now it's gonna look like the left to you because internet, but you look on the right and you see all these articles to other cases. So I'm scrolling, reading about one case, and then I see an article and then the headline captivates me so. I don't want to tell you what the article's headline was because it's going to give a bit away that I think I'm going to present this case in a way that kind of keeps you on your toes and doesn't really let you know what happened here. Okay? It's going to be a mysterious ride. But as soon as I read the article title, I was like, well, now I must know more. So I went and I read it, and I read everything I could. And as I read it, I was shocked and disgusted, and it was just like a lot. But also not a lot, because I found when trying to research this case for a video that it's really hard to research because there's not like a ton of information in very obvious places. So I had to dig a lot, but I did, and I read everything I could, and I watched all the articles. I watched all the interviews I could so that you didn't have to. And now I'm here to tell you all about this case today. Oh my gosh, I can't breathe. I'm so pregnant, it's kind of insane. Like, how am I still here? I don't know, but I'm gonna keep leaning with it and rocking with it till I'm physically unable. But I gotta say, if I sound like I can't breathe, it's because there's a little boy in my lungs, apparently. Okay. Yeah, I think I've said all the things I need to say, so now we can go ahead and get into the case. I can stop talking about it and start being about it, or start talking about it like I said I'm going to talk about it, you know what I mean? So come, gather around and let me tell you the story of the horrible murder of 18-year-old Aliza Parsy. On August 10th, 2005, the very close, tight-knit Orthodox Jewish community of Willowbrook in Staten Island, New York, was shook to its core when one of their locals, a girl that everyone knew very well, 18-year-old Aliza Parsy, was found dead in her home. This poor girl was found by her mother. Her mother's name was Seema, And Seema had been at work all day, and she got home just before or just after around 8 p.m. And she was just looking forward to having a normal night, just like a chill night with her daughter. Lizzie was her baby, her youngest child. The two still, lived together, and she was excited to come home and just have a night of normalcy, have dinner and chill at home with her kid. But as soon as she entered her home, she quickly saw that it wasn't going to be a normal night, because as she entered her home, she saw that the entire place had clearly been ransacked. There was just shit everywhere, and immediately Seema was like, oh shit, and ran upstairs to her daughter's bedroom because she knew that Lizzie was supposed to be home. I'm calling Aliza Lizzie. Everyone that I saw talk about her called Aliza Lizzie, so if it gets confusing, Aliza Lizzie. So she runs up the stairs to Lizzie's room, knowing that she's supposed to be home. And when she gets up the stairs, she finds that her daughter's bedroom door is locked. So she starts banging on the door and yelling just over and over, like, Lizzie, 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 trying to get some sort of response, but gets none. So obviously this sends her into a panic, and she runs to her phone, and instead of calling police first, she calls Lizzie's work, because her priority at this point is finding her daughter. And she's like, maybe she had to work late, maybe she got called in on a last minute shift, maybe something. So she calls Lizzie's work, and Lizzie's boss is the one that she speaks to. And this does not make her feel any better, because when she asks to speak to Lizzie, this is when the boss tells her, like, Lizzie never showed up for work today. She was supposed to come in. I tried calling her. She never showed up. She never called. She never said anything. She was essentially a no call, no show. No call, no show. So at this point, Seema freaks out and starts like word vomiting on the boss, which I think they knew each other, because I know that this boss knew Lizzie pretty well. So she's just telling her like, oh my God, I just got home. The house is ransacked. Lizzie's door's locked. She's not answering. Like, what's going on? She's freaking out. So the boss is like, okay, take a breath. Calm down if you can. You call the police, and I'm going to head over to you right now and be there with you so we can figure out what's going on. So this is when Seema does just that. She calls the police, and she tells the operator on the phone, like, listen, hey, like, well, okay, she wasn't that casual, obviously, but she's like, I was at work, I got home, my house is destroyed, I've clearly been robbed, my daughter is supposed to be here, she's not, or maybe she is, I don't know, her bedroom door's closed and locked, and she's not responding to me, and she's, telling them the whole story, and they're like, okay, listen, we're on our way, we're gonna send officers over to you. You need to go outside, get out of the house. So I'm assuming that the dispatcher's like, we don't know what's going on. There could still be somebody in your house. You need to get out. So she goes and waits outside for police to arrive. The NYPD squad from Staten Island, the 122nd precinct, responded to the call and came straight to the home that Seema and Lizzie shared. Once they spoke to Seema, they found out which door was Lizzie's, and they went to the door. And when they did, they too did not get a response. So they were like, okay, let's do what we got to do. And they knocked the door down. And once they got inside, they confirmed Seema's biggest fear. This is when they found 18-year-old Aliza Parsy dead in her room. She was stuffed under her mattress with a pillow over her face, and all officers saw when they first entered the room was her feet sticking out from under the mattress. So while this is happening, obviously, officers are not allowing Seema, Lizzie's mother, into the house, which I think is probably a good thing. I can see why that would be very frustrating for Seema, but also, like, I don't know how you could recover from seeing your child that way, so it's probably good that they didn't let her, even though it was upsetting to her. But while she's outside waiting, losing her mind, Lizzie's boss had showed up, and Lizzie's boss gave no fucks. So she goes up, she, like, marches herself up to the house, and goes to the officers, and it's just kind of like, what the fuck, guys? Like, her mother is out there panicking, you're not giving any updates, what is going on? And this is when police tell Lizzie's boss, like, listen, you need to go out there. You need to be with her right now. We just found Lizzie. She is dead, and this is going to be a really tough time for her. So Lizzie's boss goes back outside with this information, and as soon as Seema learns what happened to her daughter, she collapsed on the front steps. It was just too much for her to handle, which I can't even imagine what that would be like. And at this point, officers have now realized that this isn't just a robbery or a burglary, this is a homicide, so they call a homicide detective, somebody who specializes in that, and he comes straight to the house, and the first thing he does is go to Lizzie's room, obviously, and he starts looking around, and what he notes at first is that Lizzie is on the ground, and her hair is still damp, which led him to believe that she had just gotten out of the shower when she was attacked, that maybe she interrupted somebody in the commission of a crime, got out of the shower while somebody was in there trying to rob the house. and was killed for that reason, but they also noted that she was wearing only a towel, so they thought it was possible that some sort of sexual assault had taken place. One thing that was immediately odd to investigators on this case is that though Lizzie was dead, they found her dead and they believe she was murdered, there were no outward signs of trauma on her body to like give them any idea what had happened to her. There were no stab wounds, no bullet holes, no blood, no like marks around her neck, nothing. She was just laying there peacefully with the pillow on her face. So they were like, that's odd, like what killed this girl? But as they looked further, they found a drop of blood on Lizzie's towel. And this was very telling because Lizzie's body had no outward signs of trauma. No outward signs of trauma. So this blood was likely not hers. So they were like, oh, bug, we got the killer's blood. So they obviously took that to test against potential suspects because they believed this was the DNA of the person who had killed her. So she was, taken from the home, and the medical examiner was going to have his or her work cut out for them because Lizzie was from an Orthodox Jewish community. She was an Orthodox Jewish woman, and in that religion, if you're very, very strict, the funeral is supposed to take place within 24 hours of the person dying. That's just how it works. I didn't know that, which is weird because I at my job where I work, a lot of the attorneys I work with are Jewish, and we talk about Jewish culture and religion all the time. And I did not know that. It's never come up, but apparently that is the case. So the medical examiner was going to have to work super quickly to find out what had happened here so that she could have her funeral within 24 hours. Anyways, back to the scene before she was taken away, right? I got a little ahead of myself. Police are going through the house, going room by room, trying to collect all the evidence they can, taking note of the whole home. You know what I mean? The whole shebang. Doing what the cops do. So they go room by room and they end up in the bathroom. And this is where they find that the bathtub is still full of water, which showed that Lizzie had either taken a shower or a bath right before she was killed. And her cell phone was actually in the water, which is odd and never explained, but her cell phone was in the bathtub with the water. As they searched further through the house, they came to the back door and they found that the back door of Lizzie's apartment was unlocked. And they were like, fuck, like that's never what you want to see, because in random burglaries, apparently, ladies and gentlemen, the burglar robber will go to multiple doors in a neighborhood just checking to see which one's unlocked. And once they find one that's unlocked, they'll just go in, not knowing who's there, what's behind that door. That's a scary person who will just go into your home having no idea what's going to be behind that door. But apparently that's the common way that it's done. And once they find an open door, they go in and they burgle or they rob. And Lizzie's back door was unlocked. So now the police had found Lizzie and were going to be investigating her murder. They were going to have to figure out who Lizzie was as a person to try to figure out why somebody might want her dead. And in the process of doing this, they were going to be led down some very interesting paths before finding the killer in the place that I think that they least expected it. But to get started with all of that, police first had to answer a very basic question, and that was, who was Aliza Parsy? Aliza Parsy, who went by Lizzie, as I have already said, was a good girl. She was known as being a good girl who was raised by her mother alone. Her mother had been married twice before, having two sons, Lizzie's older brothers, whose names were Raviv and Leo, from her first marriage, and then she had Lizzie in her second. Lizzie and her mother were living on their own at the time of the murder, and the two were very close. Lizzie was said as to be treated like a princess. Lizzie was known as just being the type of girl you would want to bring home to mother if you were dating. Like, that was the thing. And seeing as that Lizzie was from a heavily Jewish community and a heavily Jewish family, she would only generally, it would only be appropriate for her to date other heavily Jewish men. So her being like the one that you'd want to bring home to your mom was a big deal in her community. Lizzie was the type of girl who was always smiling. Everyone who talked about her, every interview I saw, talked about that. She always had a smile on her face. She was always laughing, and she was super funny. Lizzie and the type of personality she had was very useful for her after she graduated high school because she took a job in sales at a moving company. And if you know anything about sales, it's a very specific type of personality who's going to do well at something like that, and you have to have charisma and just be able to connect with people, and she could. And she was taking a year off from school. She was going to go to college because she wanted to save some money, because she wanted to go to college in Manhattan because she had dreams of being a fashion designer. And this was something that she was very passionate about. She told everybody about it. She would even bring like her designs. She would like drop her designs and then bring them to work and show them to her boss. And her boss wasn't the type of lady who generally like mingled with the help, you know what I mean? But there was something about Lizzie that was so warm and inviting that the two talked all the time. And Lizzie would talk to her boss about her hopes and her dreams and her ambitions and her goals. Like, they were very close because Lizzie was easy to be close to. And on top of all of that, Lizzie was also a fun girl, a party girl. She loved going to Manhattan and going into the city with her friends. So her and a bunch of her friends would like pile into a van together, and they'd drive to the city and they'd go to the nightclubs and they'd drink and they'd dance and they'd just have a good time. Like, she was just a very typical 18-year-old girl. Like, I did all those things, but me and my friends would pile in a car and go to LA. Now I live here. Full circle moment. But her and her friends would pile in a van, go to Manhattan, same thing. Go to clubs, go drinking, just have a good time and be 18. So with this seemingly like normal, wonderful 18-year-old girl being murdered, her neighborhood was thrown into chaos. The night that she died, oh my God, everyone went crazy. Like I said, it was a very tight-knit community. Everyone knew everybody. Everyone was in everybody's business. So when they learned that she had been killed, people flocked out into the street to kind of just see what they could hear from each other, like talking to each other, and also see what sort of news coverage was going on. Just the streets were filled with people trying to figure out, just trying to be involved. You know what I mean? Just trying to like know what was going on, hear what was going on, talk to people, see what was going on. It's a good sentence. I'm proud of that. Tell me I'm good. So in the midst of all of this craziness that was going on in the streets that night, one of the people who showed up was Lizzie's older brother. This was 27-year-old Raviv Gabay. And as soon as he got there and he saw what was going on, he freaked out. He like ran to the door and tried to get in, and they wouldn't let him in. And they were like, sorry guy, like no one can go in. This is a crime scene. And he was like, that's my mother's house. That's my sister's house. That's my family in there. You have to let me in. And he starts getting intense, which I imagine such a common thing that police have to deal with. That was a weird sound, first off. But it's such a common thing that people feel and police have to deal with. Raviv lived across town. I don't know New York very well, but he lived in Brooklyn with his wife and his newborn baby. And he had been at home when he heard the news of his sister's passing and had rushed right over. And again, as soon as he got there, police were like, no, like you can't come in. And he got very upset and very belligerent, but they were pretty firm on it. They're like, I know, I understand, but you can't come in. So he went and sat with his mother, Seema, to be there and try to console her. And prior to Lizzie's death, Raviv and Seema had sort of been estranged. There had been some family issues with like money, things like that. You know how families are. But in the wake of their shared tragedy, they kind of put that aside and were there for each other and consoled each other, because you know what they say, sometimes it takes a tragedy to bring people together. It's fucked up, but it's true. So anyway, police at this point are like, okay, we need to canvass the area. We need to go door to door. We need to talk to everybody. We need to see what we can find out. And this ended up being the perfect kind of place for police to do this, because as I said, one, super tight-knit community. Everybody knew everybody. On top of that, the area that they lived was very like close quarters. Like all the houses were kind of like right on top of each other. So it was very unlikely that no one saw anything. And on top of that, everybody was kind of like in each other's business anyway. And you were hard pressed to ever like leave your house even to check the mail without running into somebody and having a conversation, because there was always somebody around. So this was the perfect place for police to gather information. And people were very willing to speak to police and tell them everything that they knew. So in doing this and talking to all the neighbors and getting all the information they could, they did learn that there had been some strange men in the neighborhood around the time that Lizzie was killed. There had been 4 or 5 men landscapers who were working on a nearby house. So police obviously followed up on this lead the way they follow up on every lead, but they weren't really sold on this being wow, okay. I don't think my brain's connected anymore. Police weren't sold on Lizzie being killed by a random intruder or this being a crime of opportunity for a couple of reasons. The crime scene was speaking to them. Lizzie herself was speaking to them. They looked at her and they looked at the scene and they were like, why did the killer cover your body? Why did the killer cover your face. This is the type of thing that's much more common when the victim and the killer know each other, because the killer is trying to sort of separate themselves from the awful thing they're doing by covering their face, a thing that makes them human. So it makes them easy, makes it easier for them to go through with what they're actually, with the murder. Because it's hard to kill somebody, you know what I mean? Especially if you're not a crazy person. So police really thought there was a good chance that Lizzie knew her killer. Like, okay, was the house ransacked? Yes. Was the back door unlocked? Yes. Did it look like there had been a burglary and things had gone wrong and Lizzie had been killed? Yes. But could someone who knew Lizzie and had killed Lizzie had staged the scene to make it look like this to take suspicion off themselves? Also yes. So with that knowledge locked, that's going to get somebody, it's going to trigger somebody. With that knowledge in their brains, police decide they need to speak to Lizzie's family. They need to speak to her mother. They need to speak to her brother, which sucks, man. It sucks that so soon after you experience this sort of loss, you have to immediately speak to police. Like, that has to be so difficult and so raw, but it is important for police to do that because the beginning of the investigation is the most important time. It's when you're getting the most evidence. It's going to get the case solved quicker. So they go to Seema and Raviv and they speak to them. They want to question them. They take DNA samples so that they can test them later and they do exclusions. And they ask them like, okay, where were you guys on this day when this happened? And Seema tells them that she had been at work all day, and Raviv says that he had also been at work. He had been in Long Island delivering cookies because the family owned like a bakery and he would go and deliver the cookies. So like, cool. Do you guys know anyone who may want to hurt Lizzie? And this is when they get their first sort of lead, because Raviv, her brother, does know somebody that he thinks might want to hurt Lizzie, and that's Lizzie's ex-boyfriend. Raviv told police that Lizzie's ex-boyfriend, a recent ex-boyfriend, had been of the Muslim faith, and because he was Muslim and Lizzie was Jewish, her family was like not into the two of them dating, because again, they wanted her to end up with another Jewish man. They were very old school. That was what they believed. That's what they thought was right. And Lizzie was like, cool, like, I'll do what you say. She didn't really care. So she broke up with him. And she told him at the time, like, I'm sorry, like, it's not anything with us. It's just that I will be disowned if we keep dating. Like, we can't. And she was kind of cool with it. She was kind of like, okay, it's over. It was an out of sight, out of mind thing for her. And she quickly moved on and was just kind of like over it. So she wasn't that into it to begin with, clearly. But he did not move on so quickly. It hit him a lot harder. And he was having a lot of trouble accepting that it was over. He was just still in love with her, and the breakup hit him like a ton of bricks. And to sort of illustrate how unhinged he had become with the breakup is one day after Lizzie had ended things with him. This is going to make you so uncomfortable. Lizzie had broken up with him. She had just been sleeping, as one does. She wakes up, she looks over, and her ex-boyfriend is in her house, in her room, sitting on the edge of her bed, watching her sleep. That's not... It's very Kanye of him, and we don't like that. We don't like to hear that, no. Boys, men, people, don't do things like that. It's not cool. It's horrifying. So upon hearing this information, police are like, okay, we need to speak to this guy, we need to talk to him yesterday. We need to get on that. So they're very stoked. They're like, we have a lead. Let's go get this fucking guy. But before they can even like go out and start trying to locate him, to bring him in, to question him, another officer comes up to them and they're like, hey, you remember that boyfriend that you were interested in talking to? Well, he's here right now at the crime scene. And they're like, okay, like bring him over here. We would like to speak to him right now. So they talk to him. And they're like, hey, we would very much like to question you more formally. Would you mind coming down to the station so we can do so? And he's like, absolutely no problem. Let's go. So they go down to the station and they bring him in to question him, but it was more of an interrogation because they were very suspicious. So they bring him in. They question him. They ask him about his whereabouts when she was killed. They ask him about that weird encounter on the edge of her bed. And at the end of the interview, somehow they actually did not think it was him. He was not making their lizard brains tingle. And on top of that, he gave a DNA sample, which they did test and later found that it did not match the DNA that was found on Lizzie's towel. So this guy just like wasn't the guy. He was sketch, but he wasn't the guy. And something that I really liked in this case when I was looking into it was one of the investigators on the case actually said that during this investigation, they made a very good point of making sure not to get tunnel vision. So basically, they were saying that they didn't like come to a conclusion on the case and just try to make all the evidence they had fit that conclusion and like disregard things that didn't fit. Like in this case, they could have like really made a case for the boyfriend, like circumstantial case for the boyfriend being guilty and like not even focus on the DNA. But instead they let the evidence talk to them. And as soon as they found like this obviously couldn't be the guy, they moved on and went down another alley, went down another route to try to find the real killer. And like, that does sound so like, duh, like that's how it should be, but that's not how it always is. So I really liked seeing that in this case, the investigator was like, we didn't want to get tunnel vision. It clearly wasn't him, so we moved the fuck on. So they did just that. They moved on, and they ended up moving on to those landscapers that the neighbors had mentioned had been there. Remember the 4 to 5 landscapers? Well, they were able to somehow track them down, and they questioned each of them. They took DNA from each of them. They tested it against the DNA found on Lizzie. And again, none of these men were a match either. So again, they were at a dead end. Lizzie's funeral was a very sad one. I don't know if you've ever been to a Jewish funeral. They're the saddest things. It's like this. It's one of the saddest things I've ever done, especially the Jewish funeral of a teenage girl who's been murdered. Like, it's so fucking sad. Not that all funerals aren't sad, but I don't know if you know. Some of you know. But I had 2 friends that were murdered. One of them was a 16-year-old Jewish girl, and her funeral was the saddest day, I think, still ever that I've experienced. And her boyfriend, who was also killed, his funeral was the next day, and his was not a Jewish funeral. And it's just like a very different feeling. It's just very heavy and just very sad. And on top of it being a Jewish funeral for a teenager who was murdered, it happened so quickly after she was killed, because remember, they need to have it within 24 hours. So everyone's raw. There are no answers. So everybody's just sitting here looking at each other, wondering, like, how did this happen? Why was Lizzie murdered? But they don't have answers yet because it's happening so quickly. It's just so sad. So her funeral happened, and the cops were actually there. The police came. 1, because they wanted to make a good relationship with the family. And 2, they wanted to kind of keep their eyes peeled and see who was there and how they were acting. Because remember, they think it's likely, or it's possible, that her killer was somebody who knew her. It ended up being good that the police were present at the funeral, because Lizzie's ex-boyfriend showed up. And I mean, tensions are already high, right? Like, this is a very tense situation. Everybody's very upset. The emotions are very raw on the surface. And this ex-boyfriend shows up. And this is the same ex-boyfriend that her brother had said may have had a reason to hurt her. And so people had some preconceived thoughts about him. So when he showed up, all hell broke loose, because he tried to walk towards Lizzie's casket. And when he did, her brother rushed him and attacked him, and a huge fight broke out. So fortunately, the police were there at that time, and they were able to break up the fight, because I cannot even imagine how intense that could have gotten. I love you so much, but you need to stop. After Lizzie's funeral, police head over to meet with the medical examiner to hear from them what their determination had been after doing their speedy review of Lizzie's body. And this is when they learned that she had been killed by manual suffocation from the pillow being pressed over her nose and mouth, and also compression to her neck. And this, to kill somebody this way, takes like a while, dude. Like, you can quickly become unconscious by this, but it takes minutes to kill somebody like this. So when police learn that, they are starting to feel like they are pretty... So police were feeling at this point that they were on the right track with thinking that this is somebody who knew Lizzie and not a stranger, because killing somebody this way is generally personal, and it's generally not premeditated. 2 other things came out of this report that ended up being positive, I guess, if you can take anything positive away from somebody being murdered. And one was that though Lizzie was found wearing only a towel, it did not appear that she had been sexually assaulted, which is great, obviously. It did, however, appear that she had had consensual sexual intercourse within 24 hours of being killed. There was DNA and stuff to show that, but it didn't look like she had been raped. So this did give them at least somebody to look at to find out like who she had been sleeping with. And in addition to this, they found that Lizzie also had DNA under her fingernails from her scratching her attacker. So she clearly fought back and made sure that there would be evidence there to help police find her killer. So police move on, and now they're going to be questioning Lizzie's friends because they're figuring that an 18-year-old girl from such a strict family might not be as open with her mother, with her family, about her intimate life, her sex life, as she would be with her friends. So they talk to her friends, and this is when they learn like some pretty basic stuff that they already knew. They learned about the clubbing, they learned about the dancing, they learned about like a smidge of underage drinking, you know, the stuff that we all did. At least the stuff that me and my friends did. I don't know your life. I don't want to assume that we are the same. But they also learned something that kind of like piqued their interest. It made their ears perk up a little bit. They learned that Lizzie had made a habit of meeting men off the internet. All the guys who were in her close circle, who lived near her, were all her friends, and they were all like brothers to her. They weren't really the types of guys that she wanted to end up with. So she would meet up with potential suitors that she met on the internet. Now, this is kind of normal now. I feel like that's how everyone's meeting everyone. Everyone's like on apps and shit. But back then in 2005, it wasn't quite as common. And to be quite honest, it's still not safe. Maybe we don't do that, guys. Maybe we don't meet strangers from the internet, says the girl who met her husband on MySpace. Okay. Do as I say, not as I do. This is your mother speaking. Do as I say, not as I do. So obviously, police have to look into this, but at this point, they don't even know where to begin. Like, the internet was so new and foreign to these investigators. One of the investigators didn't even have an email address at this time, so he was like, chat rooms? Okay. So they decide they're going to outsource this a little bit and bring in some new people. So they bring in some cyber crime detectives to handle this portion of the investigation. They were tasked with the task of going through Lizzie's computer, all of her internet history. I'm not really savvy on this kind of stuff either, but they basically had to they had to make a list of every single person that she talked to on the internet, and then vet every single one of these people, go into them, find out who they were, find out where they lived, find out their alibis, find out if they had ever met. Like, they had to go through all these people and find out all of this stuff. And can you even imagine? That sounds so daunting to me. And then I think about how investigations must be like now, considering all we do is talk to everyone on the internet. That must be so difficult. It sounds impossible, but they did it. Somehow they do find something that's useful here, and they actually felt like they had struck gold when they found a specific conversation between Lizzie and a potential suitor. And her and this guy were talking, and they had actually made plans to meet at 10 a.m. the day before Lizzie was murdered. And they had the entire thing planned out. They had it planned out so he would show up at a certain time so that Lizzie's mother would not be home, so that they could have their privacy. They planned for her to just leave the door unlocked so he could just slip in without needing to knock and bringing attention from the neighbors. For investigators, this seems almost too good to be true. So they look into this guy and they are able to trace him to Brooklyn. They go, they bring him in for questioning, and boy, did they question him. And from doing this, they found that yes, he did know Lizzie. Yes, he had met up with Lizzie. Yes, the two had even had sex. They had had sex on multiple different occasions, and he had had sex with her just the day before she was killed at that 10 a.m. meetup that they had planned, but that he had nothing to do with her murder. But they're still kind of like, guy, this seems incredibly suspicious, and we kind of think it's you. So they get a subpoena for his phone and his computer records so they can kind of look into his story and try to match it up with timelines, try to find out exactly where he was, what they talked about, where his phone might have pinged at different places, and see if his alibi matches up, or alternatively, if his cell phone showed that he had been in Lizzie's area when Lizzie was killed. They also took his DNA so they could test it against the DNA that was found in the towel, and guess what? It also did not match. What's super fucked up about this, though, this whole cyber sex crime bullshit, is because police investigated that angle, this got out to the media, and the media ran with it and started reporting on the fact that cyber sex could have had something to do with her murder, and that she essentially lived like a high-risk lifestyle and could have contributed to her own death, just completely assassinating her character. And it wasn't helpful at all. It wasn't helpful to the investigation. It definitely wasn't helpful to her family, her poor mother, who had to learn about this the stuff that her daughter was doing after the fact, and read all about this while mourning the murder of her daughter. It's so frustrating and gross that just happens. It reminds me so much of the of Jennifer Levin's murder, the preppy murder, where basically the media just completely assassinated her character as well and tried to make it seem like she was responsible for her death. It's just so gross. Like, why is it? And it's always women. It's always women. Like, no one cares what a man does sexually. No one cares about their sex lives, but when it's a woman involved, it must have something to do with it. It's just so frustrating. Whatever. She, woman, man haters club, we can all join, says the woman who's about to be the mother of a son who will grow up to be a man. Lord, bear me strength. The theories of what happened in this case just went wild. It was a man that Lizzie met on the internet and she was killed over some cyber sex nonsense. It was her ex-boyfriend who had the mentality of, if I can't have you, no one can. Or some people thought that it was somebody who was targeting Jewish women or Jewish human beings just simply for being Jewish. And that's not that hard to wrap your mind around, considering what a fucking horrible history there is there and what a reality that is. It's just there was a lot going on and there weren't answers, so people were just making up things, which is so common. When you don't know the answers, you start filling in the blanks with whatever you think might fit. People were just freaking out. Lizzie's family was freaking out. Lizzie's family was stressed. They were calling police all the time for updates, especially her brother Raviv, asking like, why aren't there any answers? Why hasn't the boyfriend been arrested yet? It was just like very intense. And it was a lot. And it's reasonable for you to have so many questions and demand answers, but there just weren't any answers to be given yet. The first huge, and I mean huge, break came for this case on September 13th, so about a month after Lizzie had been murdered. And that's when the medical examiner called the police and was like, hey, that DNA that you found on Lizzie's towel and under her nails, well, we have a hit. So basically the lab had been going through and testing every single DNA sample that had been taken throughout the duration of the investigation and systematically ruling them out one by one until they finally got a hit. Now, who do you think it was the DNA was a match for? I'm not going to tell you yet. I'm going to give you a second. You can pause the video. You can leave your guess down below. Out of everyone we've discussed so far, because they have been discussed, whose DNA was found on Lizzie at the crime scene? Go ahead and leave it down below. But don't wait until I say it and then comment it down below, because then you're a big liar. Let's be honest onions here, okay? Leave your guesses down below. It was her goddamn brother Raviv's DNA, dude. Under her nails. The blood on her towel. The same brother who had been fucking hounding police for answers. The same brother who put police on to the trail of her ex-boyfriend. It was her brother Raviv's DNA at the crime scene. Can you believe it? Did you know? Did you have an idea? Because I wanted to do this case in a way where you weren't really sure what happened. So let me know. Were you surprised or did you suspect him from the beginning? Okay, though I did exaggerate a little bit. They didn't like test the DNA and be like, bam, it's Raviv's. What the medical examiner did was they were able to test it and find that it was a male relative of Lizzie's. So then they went through each male relative and tested each of their DNA until they landed on Raviv. But either way, the DNA was a match for Raviv. So like, what the fuck? And police are thinking the same thing I'm thinking. They're like, what the fuck? Why would he do that? What is the motive for this crime? It didn't make sense. Right away, they wanted to arrest him because he's a fucking murderer. But they kind of like pumped the brakes a little bit because he looked, at least to the public, to be a distraught and grieving brother. So they didn't want to just bring him in until they had even more evidence to solidify what they already knew, which was that he had murdered his sister. At this point, though, he is definitely their number one suspect. So they start looking into him. They get like access to his cell phone records, and they also get access to all of the like outdoor surveillance cameras that would have been on his route that day where he was delivering cookies. Because you remember he said he was delivering cookies to Long Island. So they start looking at outdoor cameras to kind of put together a timeline to see if he was where he said he was or if he was in Staten Island murdering his sister. When they checked Raviv's alibi more closely, they were able to determine that he had gone across the Verrazano Bridge around 1 p.m., headed in the direction of Lizzie's home, and that he was actually in Staten Island and a block away from the home an hour later. So not in Long Island like he said, which is over an hour away. So now that they see this, police are like, okay, we need this guy to explain himself. Like, sir, we need you to explain yourself, sir. So they call him. And they're like, hey, could you like come down to the station? We want to question you a little bit further, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, the thing about it is I'm a very busy man and I'm super busy today. I don't really have the time to like come to you. So he's probably feeling like, oh shit, like why do they want to talk to me again? But then they're like, well, here's the thing. It's just that we have a suspect in mind, a friend of Lizzie's ex-boyfriend that we want to talk to you about, see if you can identify, see if you know this guy, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, you have a suspect. You have a suspect in mind. And it's not me. Okay, yeah. I will be right there to help you identify and arrest that suspect. And so he heads over to meet the officers, obviously. On September 19th, 2005, Raviv arrived at the police station with his wife. She was led to the waiting area while he was taken into an interrogation room. And as he sat there, they noted that he had scratch marks on his face. I'm not really sure how they missed that the first time around, but sure. Anyways, they sit him down, and pretty quickly he realizes that they don't have another suspect, that they are looking at him, they're looking at him hard, and he denies everything. So they presented to him everything that they had against him. The inconsistencies with his alibi, the fact that they have proof that he was near the home at the time of her murder, the DNA under her fingernails, the blood on the towel, everything, and he was just like, wasn't me. Saw him banging in the shower, wasn't me. Saw us banging on the sofa, it wasn't me. That was his like go-to. So police were like, okay. And they decided to go in a different direction, which proved to be very, very effective with Raviv. Police tell Raviv, like, you know that word on the street is that Lizzie was sexually assaulted. So when we arrest you, and we will arrest you, obviously we're going to be arresting you now, sir, everyone is going to think that you sexually assaulted your own little sister. Do you want that to be the narrative that's out there? Because if you don't tell us what happened and tell us your side of the story, that's what people are going to hear and that's what people are going to think. Your own mother is going to think that you sexually assaulted your own little sister. And this definitely rattled him and got him wanting to talk. And obviously at this point, police know that that's not the case. They have already determined that she wasn't sexually assaulted, that she had had consensual sex within 24 hours of her being killed, probably with that guy she had met on the internet. Yeah, the guy that came the morning before. That's probably what accounted for the activity. But they don't tell Raviv this, and he doesn't know this. So this freaks him out, and he's like, okay, I'll tell you what happened. So Raviv Gabay was 27 years old and newly married. He and his new wife were living in his new in-laws' home in a sort of basement apartment of their large home. Her family was well off, so he started feeling the pressure to be a provider, and a substantial one at that. And he believed that he was going to be able to do so because when he and his wife were married, his mother had gifted him the family's bakery business. What a present, can you imagine? Jeebus. Anyways, Raviv didn't think this was a good enough gift because it wasn't as profitable as he thought it would or should be, and therefore felt his mother still owed him a gift, a bigger and better gift. What a selfish fuck. Like, first off, like, shut up, go away. Like, I hate people so much. Anyway, he had learned that his mother had recently come into some money because there had been a home in Israel that was sold after her divorce, something like that. And naturally, Raviv, the selfish little fuck, thought that he was entitled to some of that money. So, the day of the murder, Raviv had been planning to go and deliver cookies in Long Island for his job, but out of nowhere, he was like, you know what I should do? You know, it's a great idea. You know, it sounds absolutely wonderful that I should do instead. I should go and rob my mother. She has that money. I should go and steal it because, like, she's at work right now. Great. Lizzie's at work right now. Fantastic. This is prime time, my baby. So, instead of going to deliver cookies in Long Island, he went to Staten Island. Long Island, Staten Island, yes. To rob his mother. So he goes in the house and he starts going room by room, ransacking everything, going through all the drawers. I don't know if he thought that she just kept the cash in the house. I don't know if she was like the type of lady who would generally do that, like not trust the banks, but that's what he was doing, trying to find whatever he could to steal. In the process of this, he says, Lizzie came out. He had no idea she was home. She had been in the bathroom, taking her shower, taking her bath. She comes out. She sees him. And he says that she jumped on his back and started attacking him and scratching him. He doesn't know if she knew it was him. He just knows that she attacked him. And in response, he grabbed her and he flipped her off of him. And when he did, she slammed her head into the box spring of her bed. And he says at that point he just panicked, that he put a pillow on her face, he put the mattress on top of her to conceal her, and he bounced. But you remember they did an autopsy, and they determined, one, she didn't have some giant head wound from smacking her head into the box spring like he said. And it had been proven that she was manually suffocated and that the mattress couldn't have done this. This is something that he had to have sat there and did. So his story was kind of bullshit, but he had implicated himself in being involved, so they were able to arrest him, and he was subsequently arrested, and he was charged with second-degree murder, which would have came with 25 years to life in prison. And while he was in prison awaiting trial, they confiscated his passport because he was also an Israeli citizen, and they were worried that if he had his passport, that he may try to just straight up dip. And it's kind of weird, like, that they confiscated his passport because I believe he was held without bail also. So, like, he wasn't getting out anyway, so I don't know why they needed his passport, but either way. Maybe, I guess, in case he escaped. But either way, he's arrested. And poor Seema, man, Lizzie's mom, to have your daughter murdered, and then to learn it was your own son who did it, and to, like, steal your money, that's so much information. I can't even imagine how that woman felt. The first time she saw her son at trial, this poor woman, he's, like, being ushered into the courtroom, and she started to scream at him first in Hebrew and then in English, and she just screamed, why, why, why? The DA on this case said of the murder, and I quote, "He came to the house for the purpose of looking and finding a large amount of money that he believed was in the home. He ransacked the home. There was a struggle. Aliza fought. He was scratched repeatedly, and in response to that, he suffocated Aliza Parsy. In the end, Raviv Gabe ended up pleading guilty to first-degree manslaughter as opposed to murder, because intent could not be proven. They could not prove that Raviv had gone there with the intention of killing Lizzie, and he had never admitted that he had intended to kill Lizzie, so they weren't able to get him on that charge. So he was instead sentenced to 18 years. And the first time he would have been eligible for parole was in 2021, actually. But I looked online, I scoured the internet, and I couldn't find anything that showed that he had even tried to be released. I know that there have been a ton of delays because of COVID. I know that there are some courthouses, at least in California, that are already closing down again because of the surge. It's like a whole thing. So I'm really curious to see what happens. That could be why we haven't heard anything about his impending release, because maybe they haven't even had his hearing yet because of things getting continued. But I'm really curious if he will be released. And I don't know if he should. It does sound like it could have been an accident, but he did also kill her during the commission of another crime. Like, he was trying to rob his mother, burgle his mother. And man, just to be able to kill your own sister, your baby sister, and then to have like the cunning and the foresight to try to lead police in a different direction and like get the heat off of you and implicate a totally innocent person, him trying to get her ex-boyfriend on police's radar and arrested, him being okay with having somebody else go down for the murder he committed, that's really ballsy, dude. So I don't know. I don't know if I feel like he should be released. I'm very curious as to what you think. So please, question of the day, let me know down below. Should he ever be released, and did his punishment fit his crime? But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all of the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for hanging out and remembering Lizzie with me today. What happened to her is so fucked up, dude. Just to be at home, murdered in your home. You're getting ready for work, something that already no one wants to be doing. Like, no one wants to be getting ready for work. You're trying to think of ways to no longer have to go there, right? So she's getting ready for work, and she's killed in her home. And she's killed by her brother who's broken into her home to rob her mother. That's so messed up. She was 18 years old, and her life was stolen from her for absolutely no reason. And that's so sad. And then, like, her story is just so untold. Like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I've never heard it before. When I looked it up online, there are no videos on her case, and it just surprised me because it's so crazy to me. Her brother murdered her and then tried to frame, well, not really try to frame, but tried to push police in the direction of her ex-boyfriend to get him arrested for the crime. Like, that's just messed up, man. I don't know. Today we're going to be discussing the horrifying murder of 18-year-old Rachel Pernosky. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. Now, today's video is a video that I came upon while researching another case. It was one of the articles on the side. A tale as old as time with me. That's basically how I find all my cases, if they're not recommended by you. And this was a case out of Canada, and I realized that I don't have a lot of cases out of Canada. Like, it doesn't come up very much. But anyways, this case stuck out to me because it is so horrible. Rachel, she was so young, and she was murdered in such a horrible way, and by a person that she did not trust, but that she was trying to trust. Somebody who she was trying to give a second chance, who really did not fucking deserve it, which we will get into. And this person went on to violate this trust, violate her just everything. So today I'm going to tell you that entire story. I read all the things so you do not have to. And at the end of the video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it knocking around in your brain while I give you all these details. But I want to give it to you now real quick, and that is this. What do you think was the motive for the murder of Rachel Pernosky? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below after I give you all the details about this case. Now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the tragic and just very disturbing murder of 18-year-old Rachel Pernosky. I want to start this video off with a quote from Rachel's family. It's something that they said after she was murdered, and I feel like it gives you just an idea of really what we're dealing with here and what to expect. So her family said, and I quote, "It is excruciating to not have Rachel in our lives any longer. And what makes this more difficult is knowing that an estranged family member has been charged with her murder." Yeah. So to get started, let's jump in our handy dandy time machine and we're going to head to March of 2013. It is a Tuesday evening and a cyclist is just riding down Old Orchard Road, which is in Chilliwack, which is in British Columbia in Canada. So they're just going, riding along, when they notice something very disturbing down the side of a steep embankment. And this was the body of a young woman. The RCMP is called in, which is the Canadian National Police Force, in case you're curious and you're not local to Canada, because I wasn't sure. I knew it was like the Canadian police, but I just wanted to make sure I was being correct when I'm reporting about some place that I'm not from. So they're called in and they cordon off the area so nobody could go in or out and they could do their policing. Because of where the body was located, they actually had to call in search and rescue to retrieve her because it was like a really steep terrain. And when they did, they weren't sure who this woman was because there wasn't, how do I word this? She wasn't from this area. So it wasn't somebody who was local to this specific area in Chilliwack who they were looking for. They weren't missing a woman there. But once they did recover her, they would find that this was the body of 18-year-old Rachel Pernosky. And she was a missing young mother of one baby boy, fucking destroy me, from Mission, which was another city in British Columbia, about 60 kilometers or 37 miles away from where she was found. I feel like it had to have been pretty clear to investigators right from the beginning that Rachel had been murdered. Obviously, they'd have to recover her. They'd have to do an autopsy, cause of death, manner of death. All of that would have to be determined, but like, an 18-year-old girl doesn't throw herself down a steep embankment 40 miles away from home after going missing just suddenly. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like it had to be clear. And once her family found out where she was found and how she was found, they were devastated, right? Heartbroken. Her sister, Brittany, had to go on Facebook. They had this Facebook page for Finding Rachel that had 2,000 members, over 2,000 members, just sitting there waiting, holding their breath, hoping for a good solution to this, hoping that Rachel would be coming home. And she had to now tell them that she wasn't. And she simply posted, quote, "We did our best." Now, what happened here and who was Rachel? Now, what really breaks my heart here is there isn't like a ton of information on Rachel that I was able to find for this video. If you've been here before, you know. I really like giving you a whole backstory on a person we're talking about here because they are so much more than just the way they were killed. But in her case, there just isn't a ton of information out there. It seems like this case didn't get a ton of coverage. I don't know if that's a Canadian thing or if it's just, you know, people are killed every day and the media picks and chooses who they find to be, you know, worth reporting on, which is ridiculous. And I think Rachel's worth reporting on. So I'm going to tell you everything that I was able to find out here. So Rachel Pernosky was born on June 15th, 1994, and she grew up in Mission, and this is where she was still living when she was murdered. She had went to Fraser View Elementary School and then had went on to Mission, secondary school, where she was very popular among her friends. Rachel, by all accounts that I read, seemed to be a wonderful girl with a laugh like no other that could brighten up anyone's mood. Rachel was very close with her sister Brittany, who is 2 years older than her. And Brittany is seemingly heartbroken by her sister's loss, saying that, like, she loves her and misses everything about her, from her terrible jokes that were followed by her completely obnoxious laugh, to the fact that she just misses hanging out with her, and she's never going to forget her or the sound, again, of that very obnoxious laugh that I feel like anyone with siblings can understand. She also said that she misses the fact that, and this just got me a little bit, that Rachel was the type of little sister who would just take things all the time without asking, and that if anything went missing in the house, they knew, like, they need to go check Rachel's room because she probably has it. She was definitely considered like a wild teenager, somebody with a very, very vivacious, plentiful social life, but somehow she was able to manage it. She was able to balance doing that and also trying to finish school. And she was probably able to do this because in addition to being very wild, she was also like very organized. Rachel was the type of person who wrote down lists and reminders and little quotes to remember and live her life by. The January before she was killed, she posted like a photo of a page from her notebook online where she wrote, quote, "Be an adventurer in search of treasure." Rachel was a young mother, which to people who knew her kind of made sense. Like one of her friends who was also named Rachel said that all through school together, Rachel was like the nurturing, guiding big sister to her. So her having a child just made total sense. When she was killed, she was 18 years old, and she had a young son named Marco, and Marco was actually named for a boy in town who had died 2 years earlier, and Marco had just turned 1 year old the February before his mother was murdered. Rachel was said to love this little boy dude, and he loved her too. Her sister said that they had an unbelievable relationship. Marco was actually living with his father, who had custody of him at this time, and he was living with his dad and his grandparents. But it was said to be like an amicable situation. Like Rachel and Marco's dad were said to have a good relationship. Like it wasn't this bad breakup in this custody battle. They were just doing what they had to do. And Marco was living with his dad, and Rachel was visiting him whenever she could. And Marco, man, loved her, and every time anybody would walk through the door where he lived, he would always quickly turn his head to see if it was his mom. It's just really sad. I don't know. I think it's because I have like a little baby that it makes me, I can't even like think about it. Like the idea of not being there for him and the idea of him not getting to see me and to miss out on all that and me to miss out on all that is really fucking sad. And like it really breaks my heart. But it did that for everybody. Everybody who knew her was devastated to lose this like petite little green-eyed sweet girl. Now, her disappearance. So it was discovered that Rachel was missing when she missed a hangout with one of her friends. So basically Rachel and her best friend Cassidy were supposed to get together and have a date. They were going to go to the movies and go and get sushi, which sounds like a literal dream. But Rachel never showed up. And this was weird already. But what made it weirder is that Cassidy like called Rachel over and over. And Rachel, who was described as the type of girl who had her phone attached to her hand, did not answer. So this was weird enough to Cassidy that she actually reached out to Brittany, Rachel's older sister, to see if she had heard from her or had any idea what was going on. So Brittany decides that she's going to go check it out and see what's going on. So she heads over to Rachel's apartment. And when she gets there, there's nothing like immediately outwardly weird. Like there's no sign of forced entry and there's no smashed windows, anything like that. But when she goes inside, that's when she's like, something is off here. Because like the lights were on, the music was playing, and Rachel's phone and purse were there, but she wasn't. This made no sense because Rachel, again, was the type of person who had her phone glued to her hand. If she had gone anywhere, if she had taken herself anywhere, she would have taken that phone. And on top of that, Brittany looked into it and discovered that Rachel's social media had just like abruptly stopped the night before. And she was the type of girl who was on social media. Like I was able to see her Twitter and she tweeted constantly. So to have her just fall off the map, not get on social media, not be in her house, but also not have her phone and not have her purse, none of this was sitting right with her sister. So her family immediately goes and reports her missing and tells police exactly what I just told you about the phone and the purse being there, about the social media being, she ghosted social media, and the fact that no one had been able to get a hold of her, and nobody had heard from her. Did I say that right? I think so. Once police heard all that and heard the fact that she had no history of running away, plus the fact that her purse was left at the house, so she had no money, no debit cards, no credit cards, no way to get anywhere, police took it pretty seriously right away and realized that something must be wrong here. After it was discovered that Rachel was missing, Cassidy, the friend she was supposed to meet with that day, posted on her Facebook saying, and I quote, "I will not stop thinking of you until you are home safe with me, your family, and your friends. I love you so much." Right away, a massive search was launched. And the Regional Integrated Homicide Investigation Team started working with Mission RCMP because the disappearance seemed to be suspicious. Like, they didn't think that she went away on her own. And Mission Search and Rescue volunteers also started helping and searched all over Rachel's neighborhood, going up and down trails and looking in wooded areas near her home to see if they could find any clues. The RCMP were even hoping to do some aerial searches to cover a wider area, while her friends and family searched on foot, telling everyone they came in contact with what was going on and to be on the lookout. And they also took, of course, to social media, because that's like the way you get things out now. A Facebook page was created, as I said in the beginning, that was dedicated to finding Rachel and, posting clues and leads, organizing searches, all the things that you do in this and keep everybody up to date. And it quickly grew to like 2,000 to 3,000 people who were just sitting and waiting and hoping that Rachel would be found. A description was put out to the media of Rachel so that people could be on the lookout, and she was described as being 5'5", 115 pounds, with long dark hair and green eyes. And she was said to have last been seen wearing jeans that had jewels on the back pockets and a purple hooded sweatshirt with a pink and white design on the front. As days go on, people are getting more and more worried that something horrible has happened to Rachel. And this is especially after Sunday came and went, because Sunday was a day that Rachel was supposed to go see her son. She always visited him on Fridays and Sundays. So for her to not show up just did not happen. She was obsessed with this child. Like, every photo she posted of them, on social media, she just talked about how in love she was with him, how obsessed she was with him, how he was her entire world. So for her to not show up made no sense. But for some reason, even though police were like looking for her and really searching, they didn't think that foul play was involved. But her family was like, there is no way that she left on her own. And her aunt even said of this, and I quote, "She was not stressed. She was not worried. She was looking forward to spending some downtime with the family." Now, in investigating the case, the police were able to get a couple of leads, and some really helpful leads came from police actually speaking to neighbors who saw things the night that Rachel disappeared. One neighbor said that she had been sitting outside smoking a cigarette with her husband when she saw Rachel sitting outside as well. The neighbor said that they had last seen Rachel on March 16th at about 12:30 in the morning. Rachel had been outside of her apartment. It was like a basement apartment on Kite Street, and she was sitting outside smoking a cigarette and drinking with a man. And this man was described as maybe having a medium build, being about 5'10", and wearing a baseball hat. And not just that, they also saw that this man was driving a white truck with brown lettering, which what they believed was brown lettering on the side. What was really helpful about this is more than one neighbor saw this. More than one neighbor said they saw her out there that night. They said they saw her at about 12:30, that they looked back at about a half an hour later. They looked back about a half an hour later, and she was gone. And they said that in looking at Rachel and looking at that interaction, there was nothing about it that made them feel like the cops needed to be called or there was anything to worry about. The two seemed very casual and seemed like they were just like chatting away. So police have this lead, but they don't know where Rachel is, and they're kind of running out of ways and places to go. But then they get a clue that makes them think that maybe they're onto something. And this is when they find out that some volunteers had been cleaning the side of a highway when they found some women's clothes. Not thinking anything of it at the time, they had just taken it and like gotten rid of it in a landfill. But now this was getting to police. This information was coming to police's, front door. And they were learning that the clothes that were taken to the landfill were described, and they seemed to match clothing that Rachel's family said that she owned. So with that, a small area of the highway was like cordoned off so that they could search for evidence. Because if her clothes were there, if they were her clothes, there could be more there. So they're looking at that. And at the same time, they also closed the landfill down for like a couple of hours so they could try to find these clothes. And somehow, miraculously, they were able to find her clothes. And when I think of that, I'm like, how? Because when stuff goes into a landfill, that is its new home. So for them to be able to find the clothes, it's amazing. But it turns out these clothes did not belong to Rachel, so now they're back to square one. But the police were optimistic about it, which is, you know, good for them. They were like, listen, she wasn't here, like that sucks, but now we have eliminated 2 areas of concern, but you still need to stay vigilant because there is an 18-year-old girl who is missing. So Rachel's gone, and they have no idea where she is. All they know is that she was last seen in the company of a young man, but police aren't coming out and saying exactly who this young man is, though a lot of people do know who this young man is, and we are going to get into that a little bit later. But then we come to the day that she was found. 3 days after she went missing, Rachel Pernosky's body was discovered, and obviously the searches were called off. She was found down that steep embankment, and when it was, you know, when they got there and they started looking around, they weren't able to determine whether she had been killed there or whether she had been dumped there. And she had to be taken away, obviously, so that an autopsy could be performed. It was then determined that Rachel had suffered blunt force trauma to the head before she was suffocated to death, and it appeared to have been manual asphyxiation, which is generally like a pretty personal method of murder. They also determined, and this is horrible, that she had been violated in several different ways after death, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of how she was, but there are, you know, 3 main ways, and they were all done. So whoever did this to her was a fucking monster. Her family was crushed. When it was determined that it was Rachel, they went over to inform her family of the news, and her sister Brittany said that it was just completely devastating, that it was like news, it was the information you never wanted to hear. And they said that, like, she was young and vibrant and at the prime of her life and had everything ahead of her, and that she just, like, did not deserve this. Which I honestly can't even imagine, because when I think about a parent losing their child, that sounds like the worst possible thing anyone could ever go through. So I can't even imagine how they were feeling, you know what I mean? I always say that, but it's true. If you really try to put yourself in that position, which I wouldn't recommend because it's devastating, like, that's the worst thing in the entire world. And as far as the community went, they were shocked. The seemingly randomness of this attack, this 18-year-old girl just taken from her home and murdered and thrown on the side of the road like a piece of trash. It was like, it was too much for people to handle. And then police had public safety, like, in the forefront of their mind. And they actually came out right away and said that even though this did seem random, that they believed this was not a random attack, that this was a targeted attack, and that the general public had nothing to fear. Even though at the time they didn't have a suspect, they said they didn't have a suspect or a motive, but they were interviewing several people of interest. And for the record, because I'm sure somebody's thinking it, Rachel's son, Marco's father, was ruled out pretty immediately. Because I know that, like, when a woman is killed, that is where your first mind would go. But he was ruled out right away. And in case you're wondering where Marco was when this happened, he was with his father. In the beginning, it was also reported that it was believed that she could have come upon foul play based on, I'm not wording this right. Basically, they thought that maybe she could have been killed by somebody who she had met online because she did have such a social media presence. And it seems like the police were going under this theory a little bit because they did have access to her social media and they were searching for clues on there. And at one point I know they had access to her Twitter because she tweeted all the time. And for a period after she first was killed, like, a bunch of her tweets were taken down. And I think that's because the police, obviously I'm speculating here, but I think that's because the police were, like, looking into some things she'd been tweeting and didn't want everyone to look into the things she was tweeting. But since then, I'm pretty sure everything is back up on her Twitter because I did go and, like, read her Twitter. This did end up seeming like a dead end, though, at least, like, the theory that she had been killed by somebody, like a stranger she met on the internet, that seemed to, like, fall out of favor with police pretty quickly. And they were left with asking the public for help, asking the public to come forward with any tips, any clues, any information that they had, and reminded them that this was an 18-year-old girl that was brutally murdered, and a hole was left in the hearts of all the people who loved her, and a child was left without his mother. Even the mayor spoke out about Rachel's death, saying that it was tragic and that something this intense happening in this sort of area was super, super rare, and then pointed out that Rachel was very well known. She was well known from the school and she was popular in the community, and just said that it was a super, super sad thing for everyone. She was well known in the community, and the community, like, came out for Rachel. So many things happened after she was killed in her honor. First, of course, the family and the social media page for Rachel were flooded with condolences. And then several businesses started collecting donations for a fund set up for her family and for her son. There was a benefit concert held at a pool hall that brought in money, and money also came in online. And a donation box was set up at a coffee shop where Brittany, Rachel's sister, worked. And a silent auction was held during an annual talent show. A couponing class donated part of their proceeds to the fund. A coffee place was collecting donations. Like, these places and people really showed up for this girl and her family. They even went as far as setting up a trust fund for Marco, which is honestly amazing because though he was young when this happened, he was only 1 year old when his mom was killed. By the time his mother's killer was caught and convicted, he was older. And his family says that he has struggled seriously because of this, that he's in counseling, and that this is going to be a burden he's going to have to carry for the rest of his life. So the fund is very helpful. And on top of all of that, on top of all the businesses, there was, of course, a candlelight vigil held in Rachel's honor. More than 300 people stood in a windy park with their lit candles. And there were flowers and candles inside the park's gazebo, along with a photo of Rachel and her son Marco. Rachel's friends and family, along with her son, were present, and she was remembered for being a smiling, sweet, happy, free-spirited girl with an outgoing personality that didn't hold back anything and made friends easily. She was just said to be one of those types of people who made you feel like you were her best friend no matter who you were, and just always was able to make you smile. So people were remembering her for that, but they were also angry, reasonably so. You're allowed to be happy and loving because you miss her and you care about her. You're also allowed to be sad because she's gone. And you're allowed to be fucking angry because of how she was killed, because of what happened to her. Rachel's former soccer coach was present at the vigil and ended up saying of this specific topic, and I quote, "I'm upset. I helped look for her. I want to find out what happened. I want to know what creep did this. It's shocking." Anyways, more than 30 police officers were assigned to Rachel's case, and they had the task of going through everything, through all the evidence, through all the interviews, going through and talking to every person of interest, which they said they had several. But even though they said they had several people of interest, there was one person who was kind of in the back of their minds from the beginning. And this was the same person that the family kind of thought might have something to do with it as well. But they just did not have enough evidence in the beginning to charge and convict this person with the crime. So time went on. 3 years went by. 3 years, from 2013 to 2016. They had this guy in the back of their mind, but they didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. But then they did. And when it came out who this was, wow. In June of 2016, there was finally enough evidence to make it possible for police to make an arrest in the connection with the murder of Rachel Pernosky. A 31-year-old man was arrested without incident, and he was charged with second-degree murder and indignity to a body. And this was Matthew Pernosky, Rachel's half-brother, her blood half-brother. Bro, I know, especially when I told you what he did to her. I know. I was like, what? Okay. Anyways, once it came out that the arrest was being made, Rachel's family came out and made a statement saying specifically, and I quote, "We are very grateful and relieved that an arrest has been made in connection with Rachel's murder. Rachel was a mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Rachel's absence from our lives has left many broken hearts and great devastation. She is missed and remembered each and every day. She was a strong and beautiful young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Our sweet Rachel will never have the opportunity to live out her dreams. She didn't deserve this. Her senseless murder has left behind a young boy who will never know his mother and will one day need answers to questions that he should never have to ask. We would like to thank the investigators at IHIT who have worked tirelessly to achieve justice for Rachel. It is excruciating to not have Rachel in our lives any longer, and what makes this more difficult is knowing that an estranged family member has been charged with her murder. There are no words to describe the pain that we're feeling or the difficulty we are facing with processing all of this. For this, we ask for privacy and thank you for allowing us to tell you about who Rachel was in life and the deep void we all feel with her gone. You will never be forgotten, Rachel." Now, like Rachel, I wasn't able to find a ton of information out about Matthew, which, to be honest, I don't really want to know that much about an asshole like this, but I was able to find some, so I will give you what I was able to find. So Matthew was born to a young mother, and by young mother I mean 18. She was 18 years old when she had him, and him and Rachel were half siblings. They shared a father, which means they shared the same blood. Matthew's parents separated when he was young. I believe they separated when he was only 2. So he had gone to live with his mother at first, but then after a little bit of time, he went and moved in with his father and his father's new wife. He did end up moving back in with his mother when he was about 11 years old. I guess he was having issues with his stepmother. He says that she was physically abusive and would beat him with spoons, so he left and went back to live with his mother. And despite this, his father stayed with this woman that would have been abusing his son, until Matthew was in his 20s. So he stayed with her a while after that. Eventually, Matthew did leave his mother's home again. He said that he felt like his mother had given up on him. And he said that in combination with his father's rejection, because I guess after moving out of his dad's house, he did give his dad his contact information so that they could try to reconnect after several years of not talking. And his dad just never hit him up. He said that these two things really affected him. But after leaving his mother's house, he went and lived with his grandparents for a while, but then his grandparents ended up separating, and he felt like he was the one who was to be blamed for this separation. So he gets kicked out of his grandparents' house, and because of that, he says he did not graduate high school. In addition to that, because all of that was what he was saying was causing his trauma and why he ended up the person he ended up, he also said that when he was younger, I believe he was around 8 years old, he was abused by a female neighbor, but that he never came forward and said anything at the time. I don't think he said anything to anyone until he was an adult, and I think it was after he was arrested. Apparently his parents knew that he had some issues, at least his mother did, because she did encourage him to get some counseling. I don't know if he ever did. If he did, I didn't see it reported, but I did see it reported that he was diagnosed with depression, but he didn't do anything to try to get out of that hole and do anything to actually, help with his depression. Like, he didn't get treatment or take medications or anything like that. He was said to have a little bit of employment here and there, but nothing substantial. He was trying to get a job and lose a job. And he had a few short relationships, but nothing serious, prior to him murdering his sister, which is when he was 27 years old. But mind you, that's how old he was when he did this. At 27 years old, he killed his 18-year-old sister, who, despite bouncing around a lot throughout his life, he knew her like most of his life. It wasn't like they were estranged, but like they knew each other. You know what I mean? Now, there's one more thing that was notable about Matthew's past, in my opinion. So it turns out, between the years of 1999 and 2001, when Rachel would have been, 5 to 7, because she was born in 1994, Matthew Pernosky ended up being arrested for sexually abusing Rachel and her sister. So he would have been 15 to 16 at this time. And she was 5 to 7. And I didn't see if this was Brittany. I didn't look into it much further. There's not a ton of information about it. And honestly, I wouldn't want to look it up anyway because it's gross. But yeah, he was arrested. And guess how much time he got for this? 2 years. And not 2 years in jail. 2 years of probation with a suspended sentence. Now, the reason I bring this up is because it actually matters. It matters in this case because this assault against Rachel is why she was meeting with Matthew in the first place. Matthew had reached out to Rachel telling her that he wanted to make amends. He wanted to apologize to her for what he did to her as a child. And Rachel, being a good and caring person, allowed him that chance. Now, we will get into all of that soon, what he did, how this happened, but first I want to talk about how he got caught. So, it appears that police had him in their sights from the very beginning. He was one of the first suspects they had. They questioned him back in 2013, and he said he had nothing to do with it. And though they weren't sure they believed him, they didn't have enough evidence to prove that he did, with enough to actually arrest him for it. So, they kept him in his mind, and they waited. And they waited until finally in 2016, they were like, okay. And they set up a sting operation to try to get him to confess. So basically, this undercover officer pretended to be the head of a criminal organization and went by the alias of Mr. Big. Mr. Big. And then would meet up with Matthew. I don't know why I called him Matt. We're not on a first name basis. I guess Matthew's a first name, but you know what I mean. Matt's a little more personal. Met up with Matthew to try to get him to confess. And this worked. Matthew confessed to this officer that he had killed his sister because she, quote, acted like a victim in the situation between him and his sister, when really it was he who suffered because he's the one who had to go through the court process as a child, and that damaged him. I can't make this shit up. He is saying that he was the victim, not her, when he's the one who molested her, and that she acted like a victim, so that's why he did what he did. And he got into more specifics than that, and all of the details he gave lined up with the evidence they actually had at the scene, so they knew that he did it. And all of this was caught on hidden video cameras, so he was like, caught. And now I'm going to tell you what he confessed to doing specifically, and I'm going to let you know now that it's not tight, okay? And this is your heads up on that, because it's just gross. This case reminds me a lot of the Jessica Padgett case. If you saw that one, you know what I'm talking about. And that's what this reminds me of. But anyway. So the night of the murder, Matthew went over with what he says was the intention to apologize to Rachel and to try to make amends with her for what he did to her when she was younger. Apparently, the night went well. They hung out. It was friendly conversation. It was easy conversation, which seems hard. They had drinks. They smoked cigarettes. They were having a very normal as opposed as normal as it can be when the subject of conversation is you doing that when I was a child, but normal conversation. Everything was fine. He said that at some point during the night, Rachel started texting with a friend of hers, and the friend was like, this friend knew what was happening, knew who she was meeting up with and what it was about. So she asked, like, how's it going? You know? And Rachel said that it was going good, that the conversation was good, that it was a little bit emotional, but good, and that she just kind of wished that he would leave soon because it was getting late and she was tired. I mean, when the neighbor saw her outside, it was already after 12:30. Apparently, somehow he saw this text exchange, and this enraged him. Enraged him enough that he went on to hit her over the head and then pin her down on the ground and suffocate her by putting his hand over her nose and mouth while she fought him. She would pry his hand away, and she would beg for her life, but he continued to do it until she was dead. Once she was dead, he took her body, he put it in a bag, and then put it in his vehicle and transported her to his home, which was in Abbotsford, another city. And when they got there, he took her out of the bag, and he abused her body in the way that I said before putting it back in the bag, driving to Chilliwack, dumping her body over that embankment, and leaving it out in the wooded area in the elements like nothing. He then went on to try to cover his tracks by sending texts to and from Rachel's phone to make it seem like she was still alive after he left. And then he went on to destroy her keys and other personal items in an attempt to make it seem like she just disappeared. So as I said, he was arrested and he was charged with second-degree murder. So second-degree murder came with a life sentence, which it should. And so it comes with a life sentence, but then you have the eligibility for parole anywhere from like 10 to 25 years, as opposed to first-degree murder in Canada, where you are automatically given 25 years before you're eligible for parole. Now, before Matthew's confession could be used at trial, the Crown, which is like the Canadian court, had to have a hearing to decide if the confession would be admissible. Now, I don't know if this is something that Canada just always does automatically. The way I read it, it sounds like it does. If you're from Canada, let me know. But they have this hearing. And I guess they decided that it was admissible because the reason I think they did is because all of a sudden, Matthew gives us a Shyamalan twist when he, on the day that the trial is supposed to begin, so years after the murder, Matthew pleads guilty to second-degree murder. He's like, okay, I did it. I guess the family learned about this deal like 2 days before the trial was supposed to start. So they found out about it and they were actually relieved. They were happy that this had happened because, I mean, they were going after him for second-degree murder anyway. So wouldn't a guilty plea just be inevitable? Not inevitable, but like if they're trying to get a guilty plea and he's just giving it to you now, you get to not have to deal with the trial because her family was beat. Her mother was just emotionally exhausted and depressed, and just like imagine going through a trial and having to hear details and see photos. Like, no. Her family also said that they weren't really surprised by the plea. Like, they always knew that he did it. Like, they knew he did it. It was just a matter of him saying that he did it, and that it doesn't really change much because you can't really get real closure from something like this. So now all the family had to do is just wait for the sentencing hearing where both sides, prosecution and defense, would have to argue as to why he should or should not have parole and how long he should have to wait, and the family could get their victim impact statements in. So the hearing comes, it happens, and Rachel's family and friends are there. It's like flooded with people who loved her, and they give their victim impact statements at that time. Rachel's sister, Rachel's mother, the father of Rachel's son all gave their victim impact statements. I don't believe they read them themselves, and I don't know if that's a Canadian thing again, but I think it was the prosecution who read them for them. I could be wrong. Let me know if you know. Her sister said during her victim impact statement, and I quote, "Words cannot express the pain and anguish our family and friends have endured since Rachel's murder. Our lives have been forever changed. We are forever broken and scarred." She added, quote, "Rachel was the victim. She was the only victim. Matthew's not the victim. He may depict himself as a victim in order to get sympathy, but he is not a victim. That's the bottom line." Her mother went on to write that she rarely goes out anymore and is, quote, "overwhelmed by emotion," end quote, on a daily basis, adding, and I quote, "Rachel's murder has broken my heart." Now, Matthew's attorney did come out and say that his client deserved some leniency, saying that he was a damaged person, but that he was made this way, that this happened to him due to being bounced around from home to home when he was a child, and from the abuse he suffered at the hands of a neighbor when he was 8. The attorney also added that he has a lot of anger built up inside that he never got a chance to deal with, but now that he's been in prison, he has been taking programs and classes, and he's being treated for depression and anxiety, and apparently he is greatly affected by what he did. The attorney told the court that Matthew is traumatized by what he did, which, good. The attorney added that he has nightmares, panic attacks, depression, sleepless nights, and flashbacks of the night, and added that he believes his client suffers from PTSD, and said that he is now getting the help he needs, and said that his client had no prior violent propensities, which I would say, like in my opinion, what he did to Rachel when she was a child, I think that's a bit violent, but maybe that's just me. But that's what I think. That's what I think. He said that his client was not a callous person, but he couldn't explain why Matthew went on to do what he did. He did kind of hint at Matthew was drunk and he might have been on drugs and he might have had an altered state of mind, but Matthew himself admitted that he wasn't drunk. He was kind of buzzed. And the Crown was like, listen, even if that is true, even if you were drunk, I'll say sure, maybe it affected your mind a little bit, but you still did what you did, and that is not an excuse. That doesn't diminish what you've done here. You don't get a free pass because you were drunk. I'm sure a lot of us wish that we did, but guess what? We fucking don't, buddy. Especially not for killing your sister, you asshole. His attorney then went on to claim that poor social skills and familial isolation made him an insecure person. And then went on to say that Matthew, that Matthew had reached out to family members throughout the years, including Rachel, but had been turned down. And when I read that, I was like, so is he saying that her turning him down is part of why he went on to do what he did? Is that his way of blaming her for what happened to her? Because that's how it hit my ear. And in my mind, I'm like, maybe not. Maybe if they had met earlier, he would have just done this sooner. The defense was essentially listen, what he did was bad, yes. But similar cases where people did something equally bad only had to serve 10 years before they were eligible for parole. The attorney went on to say that the period of, quote, ineligibility should be at a higher ends in cases of greater brutality or where multiple offenses have been committed, the offenders have egregious criminal records, or there are multiple deaths involved. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like he's saying yes, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad, so please give him a lesser amount of time before being eligible for parole. Is that how it sounded to you? Because that's how it sounded to me. Because that's what he fucking said. And then he went on to say, even if my client gets parole, it's just an eligibility for parole. You're just giving him eligibility. There's no definite, it's not definitive. That's the words. Those are the words. It's not definitive that he's ever going to get out, And even if he does, he'll have to, abide by certain conditions. Now, the prosecution, it seems, initially was trying to make it so Matthew would not get parole at all. They talked about how heinous the crime was. They talked about the fact that his reasoning for killing her, because he felt like she was acting like a victim when she was the victim of what he did to her, was totally an irrational point, an irrational thought. And they also pointed out that she was killed in her home, a place where she had the right to feel safe, and that Matthew had lied to her and came under the false pretenses of apologizing in order to get close to her to kill her. They also pointed out that it took him a long time to do what he did, and that he had many opportunities to change his mind and not do it, like all the times that Rachel was able to pry his hand away from her mouth and beg for her life. Matthew was 250 pounds and 6'1" to Rachel's 5'1" and 117-pound frame, and he was easily able to overpower her. They also believe that his entire reason for meeting her that day was actually to kill her, and then pointed out that he was calculated and cunning in how he hid his tracks after the fact, and how he lied to Rachel's family, to their faces, when he said that she was okay when he left her. Now, ultimately, Matthew was given life in prison, and his eligibility for parole would come after 13 years. And at the time, he had already served 2 years, so he got that credited, so 11 years. So from there to now, he'll be out in what? Or has the eligibility to be out in like 4 years, which doesn't seem like enough time to me. It really, really doesn't. Especially because like it's gross. It's a horrible murder, and he's never given a real motive. And without having a trial, like there's a lot of details that we'll just never be able to know. The judge did make a point to say that this is just how much time he has to serve before he's eligible for parole, but that it's possible that he could never get paroled, and that it's up to him to prove to a parole board that he is eligible to be released and that he's safe to be released. The judge basically said that they understood that the family was in pain and that they were confused, and that there was a lot of psychological damage that Rachel's murder had caused her family and friends, and that this loss is devastating and long-lasting, and no sentence is going to seem sufficient to help them deal with that or to move on from this crime. And said that Matthew, what he did was repulsive, callous, and self-serving, but that the 13 years, that giving him only 13 years before he's eligible for parole was in line with how people were sentenced that did crimes that were similar. So that's that. Matthew did speak at the hearing and did express how sorry he was, for what it's worth, in case you wanted to know. I don't know how much her family really cared how sorry he was, though. I know that I wouldn't really give a fuck how sorry he was if I was in their position, but that's just me. Now, as far as the family goes, they say that they're just focusing on raising Marco, who by the time this conviction happened was 6 years old. Rachel's sister Brittany said that Marco is so smart and so good and looks just like his mama. And she said that they go and visit Rachel's grave, and that they especially go on his birthday and at Christmas. And this could destroy your heart. Somebody gets there early and leaves a present at her grave that's to Marco from his mama. So when he gets there, he gets something from her. Oh God, I could cry. I'm not gonna, no. Oh, she just said that like Marco helps keep her sister alive, which just destroys my heart. She also said that her family is very grateful for the community support that they got during the time after Rachel was killed. They said that it was way beyond expectation. She also said that her family hopes to use their experience to help others going through similar tragic circumstances, because Brittany said that the family would like to see a person appointed to grieving families to take care of tasks that are like too painful to do. Too painful because they remind you over and over that your loved one is gone. And this revelation happened after Rachel's mother had to go to the bank and close down her dead daughter's account, and had to like contact the post office to ask them to stop sending mail. Like, I never really thought of that. Like, that part never really presented itself in my mind, that somebody would have to do that, and that each time a letter showed up addressed to Rachel, her family would receive it and all over again have to just be reminded that she's gone. If they're having one moment of their day where they're not thinking about it, now they're thinking about it again. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God. When speaking about Rachel's murder, Brittany said that the guilty plea did bring some relief, but nothing would ever help her deal with the loss of her sister. And then she said specifically of this, and I quote, "It's not something that you can get over or ever will get over. People say time heals everything, but that's not the case. You'll live with this forever." And with that statement, that, my friends, is the story of the tragic murder of 18-year-old Rachel Pernosky. I hope you found this case to be interesting and informative, and I hope I gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for remembering Rachel with me today. And now, considering everything I've told you, all the information I've given you, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that was this. Well, actually, I have two questions. One, what do you believe was the motive for the murder of Rachel Pernosky? And the second thing I want to know is, do you believe that his intention that day was actually to kill her, or do you think something made him do something he was not planning to do? That's what I want to know. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, because I feel like it could be a bit divisive. Today we're going to be discussing the tragic murder of Mary Ann Murphy. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. Now, today's video is on a case that I had never heard of, and I stumbled upon it while I was researching another case. A tale as old as time for me. And it was the headlines of this case that really grabbed me and sucked me in. Now, I'm not going to tell you what those headlines were because this is a very, it's a roller coaster of a case. And I want to give it to you in a very concise way. But when I tell you, this is a wild one and there's so much to go through. Like, wow. So today I'm going to tell you the whole story. I read all the things so that you do not have to. And at the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it knocking around in your brain while we go through all the details of this case. But then at the end, I want you to answer once you have all the information. And the question of the day is this. Who do you believe was the mastermind of the murder of Mary Ann Murphy? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below after we go through all the details of this case. Now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the tragic murder of Mary Ann Murphy. Our story begins in mid-July of 2012, and it's about 1 a.m. when a frantic call comes in to 911. The girl on the other end of the line is a 16-year-old girl named Carrie Murphy, and she tells police that someone had come and kicked in the back door of her home while she and her mother, which was 47-year-old Mary Ann Murphy, were alone in the home. Her father, Don, was gone. He was at work, so it was leaving just the girls alone. She says she wakes up to the door being kicked in. She hears her mother screaming, and she's terrified, so she books it from the house, and she actually runs to a neighbor's house where she calls 911. So police show up at the scene. They think that there's a possibility that there's still an active home invasion going on and that they're going to be encountering somebody nefarious. So they're ready to rock and roll. So police arrive at the home, and the home was located at the 8300 block of Poplar Ridge Lane. And they meet Carrie outside, who tells them that two men had kicked in her back door, broke into the house, and had attacked her mother when she left. So police go in, and they're clearing the house. They're going room for room to see what's going on. In each room that they check, they go in, it's clear, it's empty. And that's until they make it to the very back bedroom. When they open that door, they find a horrible scene. Mary Ann was there. She was laying on her bed, and she was clearly deceased. She had been stabbed over and over and over. So outside, Carrie learns that her mother has been murdered, and she's in just absolute hysterics, dude. She has to call her brother. Her brother, Scott, was working the graveyard shift, so she has to call him and tell him that somebody broke into their house and murdered their mother, which I cannot imagine receiving a call like that. And Scott had to go and call their father, Don, and give him the news, which just sounds like a horrifying experience. Meanwhile, police are inside the house. They're processing the scene, and they look at Mary Ann, and they see that she clearly went through hell. She had stab wounds all over her body, dude. Her legs, her arms, her hands, her face, her chest, and she had numerous slash marks to her neck. She had been stabbed more than 70 times, and clearly she was alive for some of them because she had defensive wounds like slash marks on her hands and on her arms. This was a shocking crime, and it was terrifying to the neighbors. In this small area, they were shocked that something this brutal could happen in their neighborhood just down the street at a house that after Mary Ann was killed had a wreath and flowers and a photo of her by the front door. They couldn't understand how this could happen. They didn't know the Murphys super well. They were kind of a quiet family that kept to themselves, but they weren't outwardly bad either. They weren't a seedy element in the neighborhood, and they couldn't understand why somebody would do this to Mary Ann. She was a 47-year-old mother of two, She had an older son named Scott, and then after that she had her daughter Carrie, and she had both of these babies with her husband Don, who she had met super young. I believe they were high school sweethearts. So they started dating, they got engaged, they got married, they built a life together. They worked hard to make ends meet, with Don being a metal worker and Mary Ann working for the Department of Public Safety. And then they went on to have their little babies, Scott and then Carrie, and they were so happy. They loved their family. They loved kids. They always wanted to be parents, and now they were. Mary Ann loved being a mom. She loved her kids, and she felt like she had been made to be a mother, and by all accounts, she had. So why was this woman brutally murdered? Who would want to kill her? This is the question that police had as they are standing in her room looking at her dead, covered in stab wounds. As police searched the room further, they found something that to me stood out and was a little bit weird. So they found that under the pillow that Mary Ann was sleeping on, there was a gun. There was a gun under her pillow that had never been fired. And I guess this was common. Mary Ann had guns. She grew up around guns in her family. Guns were just there. So she always had one. She was always locked and loaded, and she slept with one under her pillow. And to me, that's terrifying, which, don't get me wrong, I know nothing about guns. I'm not a gun person. I've never even shot a gun. But when I think about sleeping with a gun under my pillow, I feel like I would always be terrified that I would shoot myself in the head. And I'm sure it's not that easy to accidental shootings do happen. I don't know if they happen like that, but either way, she had the gun under her pillow, and it had never even been fired, which told police that she had been like completely ambushed in her sleep, because if she knew they were coming, she probably would have handled her business, you know what I mean? After looking at the scene and taking it in as a whole, they determined that this was a targeted attack. Somebody had gone there to kill Marianne, because at first they thought maybe this was a robbery that had gone wrong, but nothing had been taken and nothing was looking like a robbery. It looked like somebody had came there with the one plan, and that plan was to kill her. So what it looked like happened is that somebody had came and broke in through the back of the house. Police found a broken window at the back of the house, and there was a brick nearby. So it was thought that this brick was used to smash the window, reach in, unlock the door. Somehow, everybody, well, not everybody, somehow Marianne slept through this and didn't like have the reaction time to get her gun. And then they went in and they murdered her, whoever they were. Police now want to question Carrie because, she was the one person there at the time of the murders, and she's the one that called 911. She's like the obvious, first choice to question, right? So they want to ask her about that night, see if anything was weird, anything stood out, right? Cool. So they asked her, what happened? And she was like, okay, so me and my mom were hanging out. My mom went to bed a little earlier than me, and I stayed up in the dining room, and I was scrapbooking her version of crack. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's fine. It's from The Office. Moving on. So she's scrapbooking. It gets late. She goes to bed. And she says it's not long after she goes to bed that she hears a loud crash. And that crash is what she thought was somebody kicking in the back door. She said she hears this. She freaks out. She hears her mother start screaming. So, she books it. She runs to the neighbor's house. The beginning of our story. Right. And they did speak to the neighbor as well. And the neighbor said that they had heard the sound of a scream, but they weren't sure when they heard it. And at the time that they heard it, they just attributed it to some kids down the street making noise. So Carrie was taken to the police station, and this is where she met up with her father, Don, and her brother, Scott. The men were there, obviously, to find out what was going on, and also for police to question them because they had talked to Carrie. Carrie couldn't think of anybody who might want to hurt Marianne, so maybe, her husband or her son might have a better idea. They're older, they've known her a little bit longer. But they questioned them, and they have no idea who would want to hurt Marianne. So that wasn't super helpful, right? They couldn't give them any names to go on, but something that they did find to be helpful or useful when interviewing both the son and the dad is that Don, Marianne's husband, seemed to be a little bit weird. He seemed to be acting strangely. He didn't seem to be super affected by his wife's death. And this stood out to police, especially because, he is the husband and it's almost always the husband. So this was noteworthy to them because he wasn't acting the way one might think a husband should act when learning that your wife has been brutally murdered in your home while you're at work. Now, their suspicion of Don was only strengthened when they, canvassed the area and spoke to neighbors around, because it appeared, based on the neighbors' point of view, that there may have been some trouble in paradise. So they were saying that Don liked to drink a little bit, and that there seemed to be some trouble brewing between the couple because they often saw that Don was sleeping on the couch and he was not sleeping in the bed with his wife, which, first off, these are nosy ass neighbors. Why are you looking through their windows to see where homeboy's sleeping? But they were. So they were able to tell police that there might be something going on. So they're putting a pin in him. And they got to check his alibi. Because remember, he said he was at work. But they're like, maybe you were, maybe you weren't. We're going to come back to you. In the meantime, police move on to their next suspect. So turns out that in addition to Don sleeping on the couch, Marianne had been having a little bit of a relationship with another man. So Marianne had worked at the Department of Public Safety for almost 30 years. And during that time, she had developed a little bit of a relationship with a coworker of hers. And it wasn't just a little relationship. This was a physical affair. And apparently they had been, being physical for a while. So that's something. When they looked at her phone records, they found that she had actually spoken to this man the night that she was killed. And this was the last person that she had spoken to. Police tracked this guy down and they informed him that Marianne has been murdered. And to them, he seemed genuinely distraught. He seemed very open and very honest. He seemed like he wanted to help investigators any way that he could. He even let them go through his phone. And they just said that he seemed truly heartbroken about what happened to Marianne. But of course, they were going to have to check his alibi as well. You can't just go off of somebody acting sad because if you kill somebody, you're probably going to pretend to be sad about it. Not always, right? Sometimes they don't care. But I feel that would be if you're trying to be deceitful, maybe you want to pretend you're upset about it. I don't know. I'm not trying to give you advice on how to get away with murder. I'm just saying this is what I would be thinking. If I move. What? So police have these two people of interest. They're looking into their alibis, and they're also looking a little more thoroughly, a little more diligently at the crime scene. And they're starting to see that the crime scene doesn't really add up. house, right? So you remember how I said that there was a broken window and that it was thought that somebody had broken through this window to like open the door to break into the house. Well, it appeared that the window had been broken from inside the house. Like the glass and the brick was on the outside instead of being broke inside, which doesn't really make any sense. It just kind of looks staged. And on top of that, you remember how I said that Carrie said that immediately upon hearing her mom scream, she runs out of the house. It's 1 a.m. She calls 911. They get there. Boom, boom, boom. It happens super fast. Well, turns out that when they got there and they were looking at the scene, the blood at the scene had already started to dry and had started to coagulate. And this takes time. More time than Carrie was saying had passed between hearing her mom scream and her calling 911. Police then go to Don and they're like, hey, we would like permission to question your daughter again. And he was like, absolutely, go for it. So she's brought in for an official interview. They bring her in. They give her a polygraph test, which she fails. And it's at this point that they start pointing out the inconsistencies to her. The time, the fact that the blood had started to dry, the fact that the stage looks staged, the scene looks staged. And it's at this point that Carrie starts to change her story a little bit. And that's never a good sign, right? When you're presented with like facts that are indisputable, and you start changing your story to match up with the facts, that's not good. So the officer who's like interrogating her senses her weakness at this point and decides they're going to change tactics a little bit. And they're like, listen, I know you're lying. What you're saying, the math ain't mathin'. You're not telling me the truth. So you better start or you're going to be in big trouble. The officer said specifically to her, quote, the timeline doesn't match. We know how long it took for the deputies to get there and go inside and find your mother. That would have been within minutes after you said you heard your mother scream. And at that point, if I was her, I would have been freaking out. And at 16, you know she was freaking out. Carrie then tells police, like, okay, I do have an idea who might have killed my mom. And she then tells police that the night that her mom was killed, when she heard the door get kicked in, she actually heard voices out in the house. And it was a voice of somebody that she recognized. So she had essentially been covering for this person so that they wouldn't get in trouble. Now, who was it? Was it her father? Was it her mother's workplace romance? No, it wasn't either of them. They actually both had alibis and both their alibis checked out. They looked into it and Don was at work at the time. He did not kill his wife and her workplace romance. They were able to look into his cell phone records and found that he was nowhere near the scene when it happened. So now I'm gonna throw a curveball at you and give you a whole new name. A whole new person's coming into this story. And this is Zane Ahmed. Now, who is Zane? We're gonna get into that now. Now, Zane was a guy from the neighborhood that Carrie knew. They weren't super close or anything, they were just friends. And I did see some reports that said that Zane might have had a crush on Carrie, and that's kind of how they knew each other. But Carrie wasn't into him. She wasn't into like his dark clothes and his facial piercings. He just wasn't somebody she was interested in romantically. She tells police that Zane might have had a reason for wanting to hurt her mother because Zane, had feelings for Carrie. And Carrie had been having trouble with her mother. So basically what happened there is Carrie had a new girlfriend. And her mother, who was old school, was accepting of her dating a girl. Though there was a bit of a learning curve because, again, traditional woman, she did end up like coming to terms and being fine with the fact that her daughter was dating a woman. But her issue with the relationship was that there was a bit of an age gap. Carrie was 16 and her girlfriend, whose name was Rebecca, was 19. And Marianne had been very vocal. She was not secretive about her dislike for the age gap in the relationship. She took issue with this. And some other stuff happened, but basically she got to a point where she told Carrie that she could no longer see her girlfriend Rebecca, but Carrie still would. Now, because she had been told that she wasn't allowed to see her girlfriend, Carrie started getting creative with how she would go about seeing her. She started lying about where she was going. She would sneak out. She would wait till her mom went to bed, and then she would go and steal her mom's car keys and steal her car and go and drive to her. So she was doing the most. And in one of these occasions, Rebecca had come over to her house and Carrie had gone outside and they were hanging out in front of the house talking. Marianne hears something, goes out front to catch them. Rebecca runs into the night. And so Carrie and Marianne Murphy kind of get into a fight. And this is when Carrie tells her mother, no, Mom. I was not out here seeing Rebecca. There was a masked man out here and I saw him and I came out here to try to look for him. Marianne hears this. She knows that is bullshit because that's a ridiculous story. So she then grounds Carrie so that she cannot see Rebecca and also can't call her. So basically making it so they can't talk at all. She says this is the point that Zane comes into the picture. So basically, Carrie goes to Zane, expresses her woes to him, and is like, hey, can you help me get out of being grounded? And she had a very creative way for doing this as well. She said that she asked Zane if he would come over to her house in the middle of the night and bang on the walls, wearing a little mask and everything, to scare her mother so that her mother would think that there really had been a masked man out there, so that she would believe her daughter, and then she would get out of being grounded because she hadn't lied to her mom and hadn't been seeing Rebecca. See, when I say creative, that's a thought. That is a thought. Carrie said when Zane came over that night, he was supposed to scare her mother from the outside. He wasn't supposed to come inside, and he definitely wasn't supposed to murder her mother, but that he had. And she was scared, so she covered for him. Police hear this, and they're not really sure how they feel about the story, because it is a weird story, but they know that they need to talk to Zane, right? And they look into Zane, and they find that he actually has a record for trespassing, which, is a far cry from murdering a woman in her sleep, but criminals do be criminal sometimes, right? So they bring him in for questioning. Zane's brought in, and immediately he seems scared, but not I just murdered a woman and I don't want to get caught for it scared, more I'm a teenager in front of cops scared. And they look at him and they question him, and he says that yes, he knew Carrie, he knew her, but he hadn't killed her mother and hadn't been there the night that her mother was killed. And police actually believe him. They actually say that they didn't think he was bright enough to commit a murder, which rude, but also valid, I suppose. I feel like you don't have to be bright to commit a murder, but maybe bright to get away with it for a little bit. So they believe him, and they're actually going to let him go, but they decide that they want to give him a polygraph test first, dot all their I's, cross all their T's, make sure everything is done. So he goes in, he agrees. He goes in to take the polygraph test, and he's actually in there a while, longer than one would normally be for their polygraph test. Then the lie detector person, the lie detector teacher comes out, goes to investigators, and is like, hey, he'd like to confess. So apparently what happened is the lie detector teacher was giving him the lie detector test, and it wasn't going super hot. He wasn't coming out looking great. So midway through the interview, he stops and he's like, listen, I just want to tell the truth. I want to be honest. And this is when he tells her, what Carrie said is true. It is what happened. I went over there with the intention of just scaring her mother. And for whatever reason, and I don't know why, I brought a knife with me. He says he then went into the house. He went into Marianne's bedroom, and he was just sort of standing over her when she woke up and she saw him. So he panicked and just started stabbing her over and over and over. So, as I'm sure you can imagine, he was arrested and he was charged with murder, and he was held on a $100,000 bail, which he actually did make. He was able to make bail after his mother, oh my God, his mother had to pawn her jewelry. She had all this really, really sentimental jewelry that had been passed down from generation to generation from when she lived in Pakistan. And she had her wedding band, and she pawned all this, which this was all jewelry that she planned to give to Zane's sisters so that they could keep that tradition alive. And she pawned it. And this was used to make his bail and also pay for an attorney for him. And can you imagine having to do that for your kid? It's so messed up. So he's out. He has his attorney, and his attorney's making statements, saying he's innocent, saying they have testimony and video to prove that he wasn't involved, all the things that they say. But then he said something interesting. His attorney said that it was either the desire of Carrie to cover her own tracks or to keep someone she knew from being blamed, and that's why she had thrown Zane under the bus. Now, why is this interesting? I'm going to tell you now, and it's going to blow your mind. 5 months after Zane was arrested, right? His charges were dismissed and he was released. They realized they made a mistake. He wasn't involved at all, and 2 other people were arrested for Marianne's murder. This was her own daughter, 16-year-old Carrie, and Carrie's girlfriend, 19-year-old Rebecca. Shyamalan twist, right? What? Okay, let's talk about Carrie. Carrie was born and raised in Texas and was from a loving middle-class family. She was born to her mom, Marianne, and her dad, Don, in a pretty happy and stable family, and she was the youngest child with an older brother named Scott. Mom and dad were both in the picture. Both worked super hard to have enough money to raise their kids and give them all they could. Her and her brother were super close and could talk about anything and everything, and she seemed to have a pretty normal home life, right? She was super close with her dad, definitely a daddy's girl, but her relationship with her mom was never quite as good. Basically, her mom had super high expectations for both her and for her son, Scott, Carrie's brother. So Carrie and Scott, she had high expectations for them. she pushed both of her kids to be the absolute best they could be. And for Carrie's brother, Scott, this came super easy. He was an academic. He was very good in school. All of this came easy for him. But Carrie had a bit of a harder time, and she always felt like she wasn't really living up to her mom's expectations. Carrie found that this made her not only mad at her mother, but also resentful towards her brother, because everything just seemed to come so easy to him, right? And it didn't for her. She was following him. She was trying to, live up to what he was doing, follow in his footsteps, but she never felt like she did a good enough job. And she felt like she was like living in his shadow a little bit, because he, did super well. He'd already graduated. He'd already gotten a job, moved out, was on his own. He was doing super well while she was still in high school, tripping over her own feet, essentially. At the time of the murder, Carrie was, 16 years old. She was a freshman in high school, and she was a bit of an outcast. She definitely wasn't popular by any means, and she had trouble fitting in with most of the kids at school. She was kind of trying to find herself. She switched her style often, from dresses and boots to sideways hats and tank tops. She'd paint her nails black and wear lots of eyeshadow, going for like the goth vibes. She was just trying on lots of different hats to see what would fit with her, which is totally normal for a 16-year-old. When I tell you the looks that I went through, I didn't end up landing on like a super emo scene kid for a long time, and like it's kind of stuck around because like it wasn't a phase mom. But for her, she was just trying on different hats, metaphorically and literally, to see what worked for her, who she was. She was at a point where she was just like a little bit awkward, a little uncomfortable with herself, her body, who she was. She was a little bit thicker than the other girls in school, and this made her feel, self-conscious. It made her feel unattractive and unwanted. And as a woman who went through literally the exact thing growing up, it doesn't feel good. It is not easy to be a bigger woman at any point in your life, especially when like I'm not going to get into, I was about to go on a rant. I'm not going to go on that rant, but you know what I'm going to say. It's very difficult to be a larger woman at any juncture in life. And it's particularly hard when you're a teenager and all you want is to be seen and loved, and you just don't want to be invisible. And bigger girls in high school oftentimes are. Carrie ended up finding that sort of, acceptance that she wanted when she ended up actually joining the choir, which was something that her mother loved. She loved seeing her have like a direction and a passion. And this was good for her because she also made a bunch of friends with the choir kids with similar interests. And it was in choir that she would go on to meet a girl who would change her life forever. So in addition to all the other things that Carrie was, going through, trying to find herself, trying to figure out who she was also trying to come to terms with her sexuality. Growing up, she had always been attracted to, boys, but she was coming to a place where she didn't think she was. That wasn't feeling like something for her anymore, and she thought that she was, into women. So she ended up pursuing this interest and trying to find out where she fit in and if she, what her sexual preferences were, when she met a girl in choir class, and this was 19-year-old Rebecca Keller. Rebecca, who went by Bunny, was a super outgoing person. She was high-spirited and funny, and this immediately drew Carrie to her, and the attraction was mutual because Rebecca was super into her as well. Rebecca was cool, confident, popular, things that Carrie wanted to be, and Carrie actually had things that Rebecca wanted as well. Like Carrie had a stable family home and money and a present father and a good family, and Rebecca had grown up, in a poorer community living in a trailer park, and she had like a really bad relationship with her father. So they kind of had things that the other person wanted. Their personalities were attracted to each other. They both were attracted to each other physically. It was a match. It was matching. The yin was yanging. But not in a good way, because look what we're talking about today. So the two started hanging out, and at first it was just like a friend thing, because Carrie was still like, not sure about her sexuality. She wasn't sure. She knew she was attracted to her and she liked her, but she didn't know if she liked her in like the way you like a piece of art. You're like, this is beautiful and I'm very attracted to you like mentally and emotionally, but maybe not physically, right? So she wasn't sure if it was like that or if it was like a sexual attraction. But for Rebecca was sexually attracted to Carrie. She was bisexual and she was open with the fact that she liked Carrie. She let her know, like, I like you, I'm into this, I would like this to happen. So she was showering her with attention and affection, and Carrie found that she did like this and she was into her in that way as well. Once the two went from just friends to more, the relationship was intense. It was like wildfire. It was strong and it was hot and it was passionate, and it was all consuming for both of them. Carrie was obsessed with Rebecca. And if you think about it, this was like her first relationship. This was the first time that she was feeling accepted and loved and wanted ever. So it was very important to her.
It was shortly after the two got together that Carrie went to her brother, because remember, she felt like she could tell her brother anything, and she told him, like, I think I'm gay. I think I'm into girls. I think I'm gonna, like, date girls. And he was like, that's cool, whatever. Like, whoever and whatever you want is fine as long as you're happy. I don't care. Boogie down with your gay self, you know? Right. The kind of brother we all deserve to have. I don't have a brother, and I'm not gay. But you know what I mean. But where Scott was super accepting of, you know, her sexuality and relationships, because, like, why wouldn't he be? Whose business is it who you are attracted to and who you're, you know, banging? Like, truly, whose business is it, right? Like, I'm sorry, I'm going to get on a thing, but what business do you have to, like, care about somebody's sexual preferences as long as they're not hurting anybody? Moving on. She was worried that maybe her parents might not be. You know what I mean? Like, she was worried that they might not be quite as accepting. They were a little bit more old school. She wasn't ready to come out and tell them. So her and Rebecca were still dating, but they were doing it secretly. She would sneak out. She would lie about where she was going. She would say she was with other friends or she was going to, like, the movies. And she would instead sneak out and see Rebecca. And the two lived pretty close to each other, so this wasn't like a hard ruse to pull over one's eyes. No, it's the wool. It wasn't a hard wool to pull over her parents' eyes. It's a good sentence. I liked it. They did this for a while. This was the relationship they had for a while. But after a couple of months of dating, Rebecca was like, listen, I don't want to be like your dirty secret. You should be able to be open and honest with your family about who you are and what you want. You deserve that for yourself. And Carrie decided, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to tell them. I'm going to take the time and I'm going to tell my family. And Carrie was surprised to find that when she told her parents, they were both, like, fine with it. She was expecting some sort of big thing, but they were both open and accepting, and they were like, whatever you want is fine. Like, whoever you want is fine as long as you're happy. Her mom had a little bit of a harder time with it because, again, she was super old school, but she was willing to, like, grow and learn and change and be there for her daughter. So Carrie and Rebecca were stoked. They could be open with their relationship. They could scream their love to each other from the rooftops. They were super excited to have this relationship together. They were making plans. They were like, we're going to go to California because California, you know, us in California are very progressive folks, and they wanted to go somewhere where they could feel accepted and able to just be who they wanted to be without having to worry about people, like, being dicks about it. They were going to, like, get jobs and work hard and take care of each other and get a little house, and they were excited to build this life together. They felt like they had finally found their person. But things were not as perfect as they were hoping it would be, because as the relationship progressed, Mary Ann started to take issue with the fact that they were together. Not about them being women together, but she didn't like the way Carrie was in the relationship. She could see that it was all consuming to her daughter. She could see how obsessed she was getting with Rebecca, and could see that she didn't care about anything else. She wasn't working at school. She wasn't working hard on, like, you know, going after, like, a career. She just was focusing on one thing and nothing else. And this was hard for her mother, because her mother, remember, was somebody who wanted them, her kids, to live up to their potential and do the best that they could. So seeing her daughter kind of throwing all that away was incredibly difficult for her, and she wasn't into it. Carrie's brother Scott even said of this time, quote, I have never seen Carrie become completely and utterly infatuated with a single person, end quote. And this change in Carrie was frightening for her family. But that wasn't it. It wasn't just that she was obsessed and she was, like, you know, not doing well in school and stuff. She had been, like, pushing boundaries. For example, her father, Don, had come home to find Carrie and Rebecca in, like, a compromising position. And this was in their house, and he was not fucking about it, okay? One, he didn't like the fact that his daughter was sexually active. And two, the fact that she had brought her girlfriend into the house. Like, it wasn't cool. And if that wasn't bad enough, Mary Ann actually called the cops on Rebecca when this happened. She had Rebecca charged with trespassing because Rebecca had, quote, unlawfully and with notice that entry was forbidden, intentionally and knowingly entered and remained in habitation of Mary Ann Murphy's home without her consent. Now, Rebecca was arrested for this, but she did get released while she was waiting for, like, the trial on the trespassing charge. And this all happened the March before the murder. So things weren't good. Carrie was pissed at her mom. There was a lot of tension. Scott said you could cut that tension with a knife. And Carrie and her mother were not speaking to each other. They'd be like, you know, breakfast is ready, time for bed. Like, they weren't talking. That was all they were saying. But Carrie was still talking to Rebecca. Even though she had been grounded and her phone was taken away and it was all this jazz, Rebecca had actually given Carrie a cell phone that they called the bunny phone so that the two of them could communicate when they weren't allowed to talk to each other. Which, put a pin in the bunny phone because that is going to come back later. But first, let's go back to Zane and wrap up those loose ends real quick. When Zane was first arrested, people really believed he was involved. And remember, it took like 5 months before they dropped the charges against him. So his attorney, his family was advocating for him, saying that he wasn't responsible, but people really believed he was. And this is probably because in the early reportings of this case, it was reported that the murder weapon was found in Zane's home. And I have no idea where the hell they got this information, because it turned out that no, that wasn't even true. The knife that they were talking about, like a knife that was found in his house, was just like a tiny pocket knife that he used to like clean dirt out from under his fingernails. But it was reported to the public that the murder weapon was found in his house. It's super messed up that he had to go through this and that the public had to think he was responsible, because this is something that's going to like ruin your life. You know what I mean? Especially in like the community. If you want to keep living there, people are always going to, remember that about you. And police should have caught on pretty quick that he wasn't involved. It seems like it was pretty avoidable because, so they question him, they interrogate him. He confesses to stabbing her over and over and over. He's arrested, he's charged. But police always felt like his confession was a little bit weird. Like, somebody confessing to the murder that was already implicated in the murder should have been a slam dunk, but they knew that it seemed off. He seemed off. His story was weird. He seemed like he was under the influence of something. Like, they were skeptical right from the beginning. They question him to see if he can give them any concrete information that shows that he was there and that he was involved. They were trying to pull some guilt knowledge out of him. So they ask him to describe, like, what happened when he went there, to describe what happened when he murdered Marianne. Specifically, they're like, okay, you enter the home, you go to Marianne's room. Tell me how you got there. And his answer is something that would have made investigators' ears perk up immediately, because he starts describing going into the house, and he says he goes up the stairs to go to Marianne's room. But here's the thing. The Murphys had a one-story floor. The Murphys had a one-story home. There were no stairs inside that house, so he wouldn't climb stairs to get into her room. On top of that, he tells police he stabbed her 4 times. She was stabbed 73 times, so the math isn't mathin' here. On top of that, when police looked into whether or not he had an alibi, it turns out he did. He had been at home playing video games with his family, and of course a family could lie for you, but they were able to determine that the family didn't lie for him because they had actually taken a photo that night, and they were able to prove that it was taken that night. But regardless of this, he was arrested and charged with murder. Now, I did see some interviews with investigators that were involved, and they try to make it sound so laughable. They try to make it sound like they caught on super fast to the fact that he wasn't involved and like let him go. But in actuality, he was under suspicion for months, and his mother had to pawn all her priceless jewelry to get him out of jail. And I have no idea if they were ever able to get this jewelry back. I know in an interview with Zane, he said one of the first things he wanted to do once like he was released and everything was cool is he wanted to get a job so that he could earn some money so that he could get this jewelry back. But imagine if it never was. Like, that breaks my heart. Now, why did he confess? That's the question, right? Because that's always a question. Why do people confess to things that they don't do? He says that he just was telling police whatever they wanted to hear because he wanted to go home and he thought that they would let him. They realized that Zane was not of average intelligence and just didn't realize what was going on or how serious this was. He was scared and intimidated by the whole process, and some people said that his confession was coerced, but they said that he didn't have the education or maturity level to understand or comprehend what was going on. He said that when he confessed, he had been interviewed or interrogated for like 8 to 12 hours. They had taken his photo. They had taken his saliva. He was like terrified and didn't know better. He said his heart was racing, and when they came and they picked him up for questioning, he was just like, what the hell is going on? And he said specifically of this quote, "I just told them I did it because I was scared and nervous. I was shaking." End quote. And his sister said that she believes that under the conditions that he was under, that many people would confess just out of being scared. He has since come out and said that it was obviously stupid for him to confess to something he didn't do, especially something so serious. But I mean, yeah, it's a dumb thing to do. It's something that I would like to think I wouldn't do, but I've never been in that position. And we see it happen all the time. And I'll never understand the psychology behind that. I know there are like studies on it, but I'm just like, wow, sirs, sir. So now, how did police get to Carrie in the first place? Well, they're doing the whole thing with Zane, and they're noticing that he has a lot of inconsistencies in his story. So they start to think that maybe Carrie and Zane had done this together, like they had worked together to kill her mother. They were like, okay, Zane's stories aren't adding up. Who led us to Zane? Carrie. And Zane confessed, so obviously he's involved in some way, but if his story's not lining up completely, maybe we should look at the girl who's been lying to us the whole time anyway. I mean, she was the last person who was with our victim. She's a liar. This might be something we want to look into. So they decide to go back and try to talk to her again. And it's at this point that she is different. She's less forthcoming, she's less helpful, she's more guarded, and she lawyers up real quick. It's at this point the police kind of go to Scott, Carrie's brother, and they ask him, like, what's going on? And I think they ask him, like, if he has any reason to believe that his sister could be involved in his mother's murder, which is so sad. But he tells them about the issues between Carrie and Marianne at the time that the murder happened, and all the issues with Rebecca. They now want to look into Rebecca and their relationship further because they think there are definitely reasons that Rebecca might want something to happen to Marianne, right? I mean, first off, trying to stop the relationship. And Marianne had literally called the cops on her, and police had spoken to some friends, and they had found that Rebecca had been pretty open with the fact that she was pissed that Marianne had called the cops on her. To get started looking further into Rebecca, they decide that they want to get access to the bunny phone. Remember, we put a pin on that? We're taking the pin out, we're bringing the bunny phone back front and center. Because they realize, they're like, okay, Carrie had the bunny phone. She had the cell phone the night her mom was killed, but yet she ran to the neighbor's house to call the cops. She didn't use the cell phone. Why would that be? Could it be because there's something on that cell phone that she, and Rebecca, or just she, doesn't want us to see? Maybe, but they don't have access to the bunny phone, so they actually asked Scott for the phone number, and I guess they were able to get the records from the phone number. And in the meantime, they bring Rebecca in to talk to her as well. Apparently, Rebecca acts totally cool, calm, collected. She's very forthcoming. She appears to be honest. She tells police, like, yes, me and Carrie really liked each other and we dated, but it wasn't working out. It was hard with her family. I didn't want to be involved in the drama. So we haven't talked in a month. But the lie detector determined that was a lie. Not an actual lie detector, because she was given a polygraph test and somehow she passed. But you know what I mean. Turns out, when they looked at these phone records, they were talking all the time. They had actually started talking more since being told that they weren't allowed to talk to each other. And it turns out they were talking and texting a lot the day and the night of the murder. So they go in and they tell her, hey, we know that's a lie. We know about the bunny phone. We saw how much you guys are talking. We see the text. We have the records. We know that you were talking the night of the murder. So what's up, bro? / Rebecca. This is when she changes her story and a little more of the truth starts to come out. She says, yes, you're right. I did talk to her that night. I was even there that night. She says that that night, Carrie called her and told her, like, I killed my mother. So she shows up at the house. She finds Carrie there covered in her mom's blood, and Carrie's freaking out. So she tries to console her girlfriend as a good girlfriend would. And she's like, listen, I will help you get out of this. We need to make this look like a burglary so you can get away with this. And this is when Carrie was like, yes, I'm going to blame it on Zane. Police were able to determine that Rebecca's story was at least partially true. They were able to tell that Carrie had been looking into how to kill her mother. She had even Googled, like, what is the quickest way to kill somebody? But they were thinking that Rebecca knew more than she was saying, and that she was more involved than she was saying, because at the same time that Carrie was Googling, like, how to kill her mom super fast, she was on the phone with Rebecca. So believing that both girls were involved with the murder of Marianne, both girls were arrested. Carrie was arrested first shortly after Zane, and Rebecca was arrested after, and both girls were charged with first-degree murder. And I believe Rebecca was also charged with the sexual assault of a minor, because Carrie was 16 and the age of consent in Texas is 17. They were both given bail, which Carrie's family did post for her, but Rebecca's family couldn't afford the $80,000 bail, so she sat in jail the whole time. Rebecca's neighbors were stunned when she was arrested. Apparently she was like a good kid. They all thought that she was like really sweet. She was respectful. She would hang out with her family. She would help clean up the yard. She was just known as being like a good kid and not somebody you would ever think was going to be involved in something like this. Now, both girls are arrested, but police realize that they're going to have a little bit of trouble at trial because they know both girls are involved, but they don't know in what capacity they're involved. Like, they don't know who did the actual stabbing, and that is important because it is like different. So they're like, we need to figure out who did this. But this question would soon be answered by the girls themselves, and not because they wanted to confess, because they're dumb. So apparently what happened is while Carrie was out walking the streets, living free, while she awaited trial and Rebecca was in jail, the two were talking on the phone. And you and I both know that these phone calls are recorded. And it seems like they knew this too because they tried to be slick. I told you, Carrie is nothing if not creative. So I don't know if she got Rebecca to do this or if Rebecca was also creative. But basically, they had been talking through another inmate's like calling number. I guess they each have their own so that you can like monitor it. So she had used another inmate's calling number so that when the phone calls were recorded, they wouldn't show like on Rebecca's record. But police found out about this, obviously. They found out that the girls had talked hundreds of times in the time that they were waiting for trial to begin. So police listened to these calls. And in one of these calls, Rebecca literally says to Carrie, like, I'm just glad you didn't have to see what happened in there. And Carrie was like, the thing is, I did see it. I was in the hallway and I watched. And then Rebecca responds with, I told you to stay in your room. You weren't supposed to see anything. So now police know that it's Rebecca who did the stabbing. So now they know what happened that night. Carrie called Rebecca over, and when Rebecca showed up, she brought a knife with her. She went into Marianne's room while she slept, telling Carrie to go in her room so she didn't have to see and hopefully not hear that much. And then she went in there and she stabbed Marianne to death. The two then tried to stage the scene, and Rebecca left. And once Rebecca had been gone long enough to get far enough away that they felt safe, Carrie put on the presentation of her life, ran to her neighbor's house, and called 911. It also turns out when they listened to these recordings, they were able to determine why Marianne had been killed specifically on this day. So what had happened is Carrie and Rebecca had been communicating through the bunny phone, and Carrie got caught doing this. And her mom took the phone and was like, what's the passcode? Give me the passcode. And Carrie refused to give it to her. So Marianne was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take this with me to work. I have somebody there who can get into this, and I'm going to find out what the fuck is on this phone. The girls were worried that if Marianne got into this phone, Rebecca would go to jail because the two had been sending illicit photos, they had been sexting, all of that stuff, and Rebecca was too old to be doing this. It was technically illegal, so they were worried Rebecca was going to go to jail. So that day, they started Googling how to murder somebody quickly. It was very hard for Carrie's family to believe that she was involved. Her grandma, Marianne's mother, said that Carrie and her mom had a good relationship. They would fight, but they would always make up with each other. And she said specifically this quote, they would have fights, but they would always say, I'm sorry. They would always say, I love you. But I guess the fighting got pretty bad. It got so bad that even a neighbor knew that stuff was going on. A neighbor nearby said that they knew that Marianne was not happy about the two dating, and he or she, I can't remember, also knew that they were always fighting. They said that at least every day or every other day, Marianne and Carrie's arguments would spill out of the garage, and he would just see them arguing and fighting. In December of 2012, 2 days before Carrie's 17th birthday, the judge decided that Carrie, who had prior to this been treated as a minor, was going to be tried as an adult. This was decided after it was determined that, quote, there is little, if any, prospect of adequate protection of the public and likelihood of reasonable rehabilitation by use of procedures, services, and facilities currently available to the juvenile court, end quote. And this is when Carrie's name was finally released to the public, because prior to this, they were keeping her name private because she was considered a juvenile. But guess what? Bitch, we know your name now. I'm sorry, I'm a little spicy. The prosecutor said that they were super happy that Carrie was going to be tried as an adult. They said that this was a cold-hearted execution, and they had been worried that she was going to go through the juvenile court system, and they were concerned about this because the cap for the crime she had committed would have been 40 years if she had gone through the juvenile system, and they wanted to go after the actual most at trial. But a trial never actually happened because both girls ended up pleading guilty. Now, Rebecca was the first of the two girls to plead guilty. Basically, right before jury selection was set to begin on her case, in a last-minute decision, Rebecca admitted guilt. Kinda. She admitted to the court that she participated in the planning of the crime, had purchased the knife used in the murder, and had assisted in staging the break-in and disposing of evidence. Which is okay, cool. But she did sort of admit guilt to being the person to actually stab Marianne over the phone, so I thought at first that it was weird that they would accept this plea deal. But it turns out there was le scandale in the court system. Basically, what had happened is the lead investigator on Marianne's murder case had a relationship, a quote, consensual sexual encounter with a key witness in another murder case, a super high profile murder case that I may cover, I may not, I haven't decided yet. But he got fired for this. This was a super big deal. He was fired, and at the time he was fired, he was the lead investigator on at least eight pending murder cases, this one included in that, and they were worried that if this case went to trial, he would get called as a witness at the trial, and they didn't think that would look super good. I mean, think about it. They had already arrested and charged 20-year-old Zane with the murder when it turns out he was not involved. So would it really look super good for the lead investigator to be the type that would rush to judgment like that and also bang witnesses? it would really make you question how good of an investigator this guy was, right? And it was this is like the kind of thing a defense attorney would sink their teeth into. I mean, Rebecca's attorney even said of this, quote, "The general idea is that when you have any law enforcement officer, especially someone who has that much responsibility, commit some act of misconduct and then is terminated, then that certainly casts a shadow on that person's work." Anyways, with that said, both girls were given deals to avoid trial, and both girls pled guilty. So Rebecca was given 60 years for her involvement, and she will first be eligible for parole in 2042 when she is 50 years old. And as far as Carrie goes, she was given 30 years for her involvement in the murder, which means that she will be eligible for parole in 2028 when she is 32 years old. It is so sad, man. I cannot imagine being in that family. I cannot imagine being Scott or Dawn, knowing that your mother and wife were murdered and that your daughter/sister were responsible. That is so sad. Scott said of losing his mother, quote, "There isn't a day that goes by that I don't miss her. I miss her more than anything, but I think she was doing what she thought was right to make sure her child succeeded, but the obsession with being in love with each other drove them to do one of the darkest things I can ever imagine." The darkest thing he could ever imagine. And for what? This big love, this huge relationship that didn't matter and didn't last anyway. Because as I'm sure you can imagine, once they were arrested, the two broke up, of course. But don't worry, they have remained friends and stay in communication to this day. Whatever. Rebecca did try to appeal, but after an independent review, it was found that there were no arguable grounds for this review, and therefore her appeal was frivolous. And as for Carrie goes, I did not see that she tried to appeal or anything like that, but I did see that she has a Write a Prisoner page. You guys know how much I love a Write a Prisoner page. On this page, you know, she has photos of herself and she tells you that she is 5'10" with a nice shape, brown hair, pretty hazel eyes, rosy cheeks, fair skin, some freckles, a beautiful smile, and she is a bisexual Capricorn. And then she says of herself, quote, "I have learned so much about myself and life through this journey I'm on. I believe everyone makes mistakes and deserves the chance to learn and grow from them." And with that, my friends, is the story of the tragic murder of Marianne Murphy. I hope that it was informative and made sense, and I gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I just want to thank you for remembering Marianne with me today. Now, considering everything I told you throughout this video, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that is this. Who do you believe was the mastermind behind the murder of Marianne Murphy? Was it Rebecca or was it Carrie? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. So that was the end of our compilation, guys. I just want to thank you for being here when you could be anywhere else in the world. I think that is great. I want to say one last thank you to Ana Luisa Jewelry and remind you to shop their biggest sale of the year because, again, it is sponsors like Ana Luisa that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And I just want to say thank you, and I want to say happy holidays, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. And yeah, I hope to see you in my next video. And in the meantime, take care of yourself.